Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight I've gathered some stories that'll hopefully make you feel a whole lot better about whatever chaos is happening in your life right now. We're winding down tonight with some wild stories from Reddit where people are asking the age-old question, am I the bad person? Whether you feel overwhelmed, stressed, or even just need something to play in the background to calm your worries, these stories will make you think, hey, maybe today wasn't so bad after all. Be sure to comment down below what's been going on in your life right now, good or bad. Trust me, there's other people who are living in your shoes right now that probably need someone to talk to. For now, settle in, get comfortable, and let's jump into some stories that'll remind you that no matter how bad your day is going, at least you're not dealing with these situations. Our first story comes from someone whose family loyalty got tested in the most brutal way possible. Am I the bad person for not attending my brother's wedding after he slept with my ex? This happened about 6 months ago, and my family still won't let it go. I was with Sarah for 3 years. We lived together, talked about marriage, the whole 9 yards. I thought we had something real until I found out she'd been sleeping with my brother Jake behind my back for God knows how long. The discovery happened in the worst possible way. I came home early from work one day and heard voices upstairs. I figured Sarah had a friend over, so I was trying to be quiet when I walked up to our bedroom. The door was cracked open, and I could see them together. My girlfriend of 3 years and my own brother. I just stood there for a minute, completely frozen, trying to process what I was seeing. I didn't even confront them that day. I just grabbed some clothes and left. Stayed at a friend's place for a week before either of them even realised I knew. When I finally told Jake I'd seen everything, he had the nerve to say they'd fallen in love and couldn't help themselves. Sarah tried to apologise, said it just happened and she never meant to hurt me, but that she couldn't fight her feelings anymore. The whole thing destroyed me. Not just losing Sarah, but losing my brother too. We'd always been close growing up. He was the guy I called when I needed advice, the person I trusted most in the world. Finding out he'd been betraying me for months, while looking me in the eye every Sunday at family dinner, was worse than the cheating itself. Fast forward to 2 months ago, when Jake called to tell me he and Sarah were engaged. He actually had the audacity to ask if I'd be his best man. Said that what happened between them was real love, and that family should come first. I told him he should have thought about family before he decided to sleep with my girlfriend in my own bed. The wedding is next weekend, and my entire family expects me to show up. My mum keeps calling me, crying about how I'm tearing the family apart by holding a grudge. My dad says I need to be the bigger person and that Jake made a mistake, but he's still my brother. Even my grandmother got involved, telling me that family forgives and that I'm being selfish by missing such an important day. Everyone keeps saying I should put the past behind me and support Jake's happiness. They act like I'm the one causing drama by refusing to celebrate the relationship that destroyed mine. My aunt even suggested that maybe it's better this way, since Sarah and Jake are clearly meant to be together, and I should be happy they found love. The worst part is that they're all acting like I'm overreacting. Like my brother sleeping with my girlfriend is just some minor disagreement we should get past. They keep saying it's been 6 months and I should be over it by now. My mum told me that refusing to attend makes me look bitter and small, and that people will judge our whole family for the drama. I've tried explaining that it's not about holding grudges or being bitter. It's about self-respect. How am I supposed to sit in a church and watch my brother marry the woman who cheated on me with him? How am I supposed to smile and pretend everything's fine when they're exchanging vows with rings? They probably picked out while I was still thinking Sarah and I had a future. My friends all support my decision, but they don't have to deal with the family pressure. Every conversation with a relative turns into a guilt trip about how I'm destroying family unity over something that's in the past. They keep reminding me that Jake is my only brother and that I'll regret missing his wedding someday. Sarah even reached out to me last week. She said she knows things are awkward, but she hopes we can all move forward as a family. She actually asked if I could give a speech at the reception about how happy I am for them. I couldn't believe the nerve of that request. The wedding is in 3 days and my phone won't stop ringing. Everyone has an opinion about what I should do. Half the family thinks I'm justified in staying away, but the other half thinks I'm being dramatic and need to get over it. My cousin offered to be my +1 for moral support, but I told her there's no amount of support that would make sitting through that ceremony bearable. That story is absolutely brutal, and honestly, OP is completely justified in his decision. The brother didn't just betray him once by sleeping with his girlfriend, he betrayed him every single day for months, while pretending everything was normal. The family expecting him to show up and celebrate is just adding insult to injury. Some boundaries can't be crossed, and this is definitely one of them. You don't get to destroy someone's relationship and then demand they celebrate your happiness. Moving on to our next story, which involves someone who discovered that family apparently means becoming a free babysitting service. Am I the bad person for refusing to babysit my sister's kids every weekend? My sister Emma has 2 kids, ages 5 and 7, and for the past year, she's been dropping them off at my place almost every Saturday morning. It started as an occasional favour when she needed to run errands or had appointments, but it's turned into this expectation that I'm available every weekend to watch her children. Emma is a single mum, and I get that parenting is exhausting. I really do have sympathy for her situation, but somewhere along the way, my Saturdays stopped belonging to me. She'll text me Friday night, asking what time she can drop off the kids, not if she can drop them off. Like it's already decided that I'm spending my weekend being a free babysitter. The kids are sweet, don't get me wrong, but they're also a lot of work. They need constant attention, they fight with each other, and they expect me to entertain them all day. I've spent my own money buying toys and snacks to keep them happy. I've cancelled plans with friends, missed out on dating opportunities, and basically put my entire social life on hold because Emma needs her weekly break. What really bothers me is that she treats it like I owe her this. She'll say things like, "You don't have kids, so you don't understand how hard it is," or "Family helps family." But when I ask her to return the favour by helping me move or watching my dog when I travel, she's always too busy with the kids or too tired from work. Last month, I had plans to go on a weekend trip with some college friends. It was the first vacation I'd planned in over a year, and I was really looking forward to it. When I told Emma I wouldn't be available that Saturday, she completely lost it. She said I was being selfish, and that she'd already made plans because she was counting on me to watch the kids. I suggested she ask our mum or find a babysitter, but Emma said Mum is too old to handle both kids, and babysitters are too expensive. She actually had the nerve to ask me to cancel my trip because her plans were more important. When I refused, she called me selfish and said I clearly don't care about my niece and nephew. The breaking point came 2 weekends ago when Emma dropped the kids off and didn't come back until Sunday evening. She said she'd decided to extend her plans and figured I wouldn't mind keeping them overnight. She didn't ask, didn't check if I had Sunday plans, just assumed I'd be fine with a surprise sleepover. I was furious. I had a date planned for Sunday, which I had to cancel. I didn't have enough food for 3 people for 2 days. The kids were asking when Mommy was coming back, and I had no idea what to tell them. When Emma finally showed up Sunday night, she was tan and relaxed, talking about how amazing her weekend getaway was. That's when I finally snapped. I told Emma that I was done being her free childcare service. I said I love my niece and nephew, but I have my own life and my own responsibilities. I explained that I need advance notice, and I need her to ask instead of just assuming I'm available. Emma completely exploded. She started screaming about how I don't understand what it's like to be a single mother, how she never gets a break, and how families are supposed to support each other. She said I was abandoning her and her children when they needed me most. She accused me of being selfish and only caring about myself. She's been giving me the silent treatment for 2 weeks now. Our mum called to say Emma is struggling without her weekly break, and that maybe I should reconsider. Even our aunt got involved, saying that helping with childcare is what aunts are supposed to do, and that I'm being too harsh. The guilt is really getting to me. I see Emma's Facebook posts about how exhausted she is, how she never gets time for herself, how hard single parenting is. Part of me feels terrible for taking away the one thing that was helping her cope. But another part of me is angry that my needs don't seem to matter to anyone. My friends all say I did the right thing and that Emma was taking advantage of me. But my family thinks I'm being selfish and that I should help more since I don't have kids of my own. They keep saying that someday I might need help and I'll want family to be there for me. That story ends there, and wow, Emma really turned her sister into an unpaid nanny and then had the audacity to get mad when boundaries were finally set. Being a single mum is tough, but that doesn't give you the right to hijack someone else's entire weekend every week without even asking. The overnight surprise was the final straw that broke the camel's back. OP deserves to have a life outside of providing free childcare for someone who clearly doesn't appreciate the sacrifice. Let's move on to another family drama that involves financial expectations and guilt trips. Am I the bad person for not paying for my mum's new phone after she broke hers? My mum has this habit of breaking her electronics and then expecting other people to replace them. This has been going on for years, but it's gotten worse since I started my first real job out of college. 3 weeks ago, Mum called me in tears saying she'd dropped her phone in the toilet. Apparently, she was texting while using the bathroom and it just slipped out of her hands. She tried putting it in rice, taking it to a repair shop, everything, but it was completely dead. Instead of asking if I could help her figure out a solution, she immediately told me that I needed to buy her a new one. Not asked, told. She said that since I'm the responsible one in the family and I have a steady income, it's my job to take care of these things. She already had a phone picked out, some expensive smartphone that costs more than my monthly grocery budget. I tried explaining that I'm barely covering my own bills right now. I'm still paying off student loans, I've got rent, car payments, insurance, and I'm trying to build an emergency fund. I'm not exactly swimming in disposable income. But Mum just kept saying that I make more money than she does, and that family takes care of family. The thing is, this isn't the first time she's expected me to bail her out financially. Last year she needed money for car repairs after she rear-ended someone while texting. Before that, it was money for new glasses after she sat on hers. Every time something goes wrong in her life, she immediately looks to me to fix it. What really bothers me is that Mum isn't exactly struggling financially. She gets disability payments, she lives in subsidised housing, and she doesn't have a lot of major expenses, but she also doesn't budget well. She'll spend money on lottery tickets, cigarettes and takeout, then act like she's destitute when something unexpected comes up. When I told her I couldn't afford to buy her a new phone, she completely lost it. She started crying and saying that I don't care about her, that I'm selfish and ungrateful. She brought up everything she'd done for me as a kid, how she'd sacrificed to raise me, and how this was my chance to pay her back. The guilt trip got intense. She said she couldn't apply for jobs without a phone, couldn't call doctors for appointments, couldn't stay in touch with family. She made it sound like I was personally responsible for ruining her life by not buying her a replacement. Then she started telling other family members about how I'd abandoned her in her time of need. My aunt called to lecture me about respecting my elders and taking care of my mother. My cousin sent me a text saying I should be ashamed of myself for letting Mum go without a phone. Everyone keeps reminding me that she's my mother and that she raised me when I couldn't take care of myself. They say that now it's my turn to take care of her, and that refusing to help with something as basic as a phone shows that I don't appreciate everything she's done for me. The pressure is really getting to me. I feel guilty every time I think about Mum sitting at home without a way to communicate. But I also feel angry that she automatically assumed I'd pay for her mistake, and that she's turned the whole family against me when I said no. I suggested she could get a basic phone instead of the expensive smartphone she wanted, but she said she needs all the features for staying connected and managing her health. I offered to help her look into payment plans or see if her disability coverage includes phone replacement, but she said that's too complicated and I should just handle it. My friends think I'm being manipulated and that Mom needs to learn to be more responsible with her belongings. They point out that I'm not her parent and that constantly bailing her out isn't helping either of us. But my family thinks I'm being heartless and that I should prioritise my mother's needs over my own financial goals. The whole situation is making me question everything. Am I really being selfish by not wanting to spend money I don't have on replacing something she broke through carelessness? Or am I failing as a daughter by not putting my mother's needs first? That story wraps up there, and honestly, this is classic financial manipulation disguised as family obligation. OP's mum has created a pattern where her mistakes become everyone else's responsibility to fix. The fact that she immediately demanded an expensive phone instead of being grateful for any help shows this isn't about necessity, it's about entitlement. Being a parent doesn't give you lifetime access to your adult child's bank account, especially when they're struggling financially themselves. Our next story comes from someone who learned the hard way that family gatherings can become guilt trip central when you dare to prioritise your own plans. Am I the bad person for skipping my dad's birthday party to go on a trip? I know how the title sounds, but hear me out. I planned this weekend getaway to the mountains with my girlfriend back in February. We booked the cabin, took time off work, and I was really looking forward to some time away from the city. This trip has been on my calendar for literally 6 months. 2 weeks ago, my dad casually mentioned that he was thinking about having a birthday party. His actual birthday is in 3 weeks, but he wanted to do something the same weekend I'm supposed to be out of town. When I reminded him about my trip, he just shrugged and said we'd figure something out. Fast forward to last week, and suddenly this casual birthday idea has turned into this huge family reunion. My mum has invited aunts, uncles, cousins I haven't seen in years. She's ordered a custom cake, planned this whole elaborate menu, and keeps talking about how special it's going to be to have everyone together. The problem is nobody bothered to check with me before planning all this. They just assumed I'd cancel my plans because first. When family comes, I explained that I'd already paid for the cabin and couldn't get a refund. My dad said I was prioritising fun over family. My mum started crying and said she'd been looking forward to having all her children there for such an important milestone. I suggested we celebrate before I leave, or the weekend after I get back, but apparently that's not good enough. My dad said his birthday only happens once a year, and that I should have checked with the family before making plans. He actually said that a responsible son would have known better than to schedule a vacation during birthday season. The guilt trips got more intense as the week went on. My sister called to say that Dad has been really hurt by my decision and that she's never seen him so disappointed. My aunt sent me a long text about how family traditions matter more than romantic getaways and that I'm setting a bad precedent for the younger cousins. My mum pulled out all the stops yesterday. She said this might be one of Dad's last big birthdays and that I'll regret missing it someday. She reminded me of all the sacrifices they made when I was growing up and how they never missed any of my important events. She said she doesn't understand how I can be so selfish when all they want is their son there to celebrate. Even my girlfriend is starting to waver. She says she feels terrible that our trip is causing so much family drama and maybe we should just reschedule. But we've been planning this for months and it's not like my dad's birthday was some surprise that came out of nowhere. His birthday is the same day every year, and they chose to plan the party for a weekend when they knew I'd be unavailable. The thing that seems to care about that really gets me is that nobody money I'll lose, or the fact that I've been looking forward to this trip for half a year. They act like my plans don't matter because they're not family related. When I pointed out that I deserve to have a life outside of family obligations, my dad said that's the kind of attitude that destroys families. My brother thinks I should just suck it up and be there because it's easier than dealing with the fallout. He said Dad's been talking about this party for weeks and that missing it will create drama that'll last for months. He doesn't want to deal with the tension at future family gatherings if I don't show up. The party is this Saturday and my trip is supposed to start Friday afternoon. My phone has been blowing up with messages from relatives asking if I've changed my mind. Some are supportive and say they understand that I had prior commitments, but most are treating me like I'm the worst son in the world for choosing a vacation over my father's birthday. I feel like I'm in an impossible situation. If I cancel my trip, I'm letting my girlfriend down and losing money I can't afford to lose. If I stick to my plans, I'm apparently destroying family relationships and proving that I don't care about the people who raised me. That story ends there, and honestly, this is such a perfect example of how families can weaponize guilt when they don't get their way. OP booked his trip 6 months in advance, but somehow he's supposed to be a mind reader about when Dad might want to celebrate. The fact that they planned the entire party around a weekend they knew he'd be unavailable shows this was intentional manipulation. You can't just expect people to drop their lives because you decided to throw a last-minute celebration. Let's dive into our next workplace nightmare that shows how helping a coworker once can somehow turn you into their personal chauffeur service. Am I the bad person for refusing to drive my coworker to work every day? This started about 2 months ago when my coworker Derek mentioned that his car was in the shop and he needed a ride to work. Since we work at the same place and I'm generally a helpful person, I offered to give him a lift for a few days until his car was fixed. Those few days turned into 2 weeks, then a month, and now it's been 8 weeks of Derek expecting me to pick him up every single morning. His car apparently needs more work than originally thought. Then it needed a new transmission. Then he was waiting on parts. Then he decided it wasn't worth fixing and he'd just buy a new one when he saved up enough money. The thing is, Derek lives 40 minutes in the opposite direction from my normal commute. What used to be a 20-minute drive to work has become an hour and a half round trip every morning just to collect him. I'm leaving my house at 6:30 instead of 7:15, using way more gas and putting extra wear on my car to basically run a free taxi service. At first, Derek was grateful. He'd offer to pay for gas, bring me coffee, and constantly thank me for helping him out. But as the weeks went on, he started treating the rides like they were my obligation rather than my favour. He'd text me the night before with pickup times, like he was my boss giving me a schedule. If I was running 5 minutes late, he'd call asking where I was. Last week was the breaking point. Derek texted me at 11 at night saying he needed to be at work early the next day for a meeting, so I'd need to pick him up at 6 instead of our usual 6:45. No please, no asking if it was possible, just informing me that my schedule needed to change to accommodate his needs. I replied that I couldn't do the earlier pickup because I had my own morning routine to consider. Derek called me immediately, saying it was really important and that he was counting on me. When I explained that leaving that early would mess up my entire morning, he got frustrated and said I was being difficult over 15 minutes. That's when I realised this whole situation had gotten completely out of hand. I told Derek that I needed to stop giving him daily, needed to figure out alternative rides, and that transportation. I suggested he look into ride shares, public transit, or maybe ask other co-workers who live closer to him for help. Derek completely lost it. He said I was abandoning him when he needed help most and that I was being selfish after he'd been depending on me for months. He pointed out that the drive wasn't that big of a deal for me since I was going to work anyway, conveniently ignoring the fact that his house is nowhere near my route. He started telling other co-workers that I'd suddenly decided to stop helping him for no reason. He made it sound like I'd just randomly gotten tired of being nice and was leaving him stranded. Several people approached me asking why I was being so cold to Derek and whether something had happened between us. When I explained the full situation, including the 40-minute detour and the 8 weeks of daily pickups, most people understood my position. But Derek had already painted himself as the victim, so some co-workers still think I'm being heartless for cutting off someone who doesn't have reliable transportation. Derek tried guilt-tripping me by saying he might lose his job if he can't get to work consistently. He said he'd been using the money he would have spent on car repairs to help his elderly mother with her medical bills, and that I was basically punishing him for being a good son. The manipulation got even worse when he started timing his arrival at work to coincide with mine, then making loud comments about how some people abandon their friends when it becomes inconvenient. He'd sigh dramatically whenever he walked past my desk and make passive-aggressive remarks about having to take expensive ride shares because certain people couldn't be bothered to help anymore. My supervisor even pulled me aside to ask if everything was okay between Derek and me because the tension was affecting the workplace atmosphere. I explained the situation and she understood my position, but she also said that workplace harmony was important and maybe we could find a compromise. Derek suggested that maybe I could just drive him 3 days a week instead of 5, like that was some generous concession on his part. He said he'd be willing to meet me halfway by only asking for rides on the days when he really needed them, which basically meant he'd still expect me to go out of my way whenever it was convenient for him. I stood firm and said no. I told Derek that 8 weeks of daily rides was already way more than most people would have done, and that it was time for him to take responsibility for his own transportation. I pointed out that plenty of people manage to get to work without relying on co-workers to drive them around. The whole thing has created this weird dynamic at work where people have opinions about whether I'm being reasonable or heartless. Derek continues to act like I betrayed him, and I'm starting to wonder if I should have just gradually reduced the rides instead of cutting them off completely. That story wraps up there, and wow, Derek really turned a temporary favour into a permanent expectation and then played victim when the free ride ended. 40 minutes out of the way every single day for 2 months is absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that he started making demands instead of being grateful shows exactly why OP needed to cut this off. Some people will take advantage of kindness until you're basically their unpaid employee. And Derek is clearly one of those people. Moving on to another family financial drama that shows how saying no to bad spending habits can make you the villain in everyone's story, my cousin. Am I the bad person for not helping pay his rent? My cousin Marcus and I have always been pretty close. We grew up together, went to the same schools, and even lived together for a year after college. But over the past few years, I've watched him make increasingly bad financial decisions, and now he expects me to bail him out when things go wrong. Marcus has a decent job at a marketing firm. He makes about the same salary I do, which is enough to cover his rent, bills, and living expenses with some left over for savings. The problem is that Marcus treats his paycheck like it's meant for entertainment rather than responsibility. Every weekend, he's out at expensive bars and clubs, dropping hundreds of dollars on bottle service and rounds of drinks for people he barely knows. He buys the latest gadgets the moment they come out, even though his current stuff works perfectly fine. Last month, he bought a $1,000 watch because he said he deserved to treat himself after a hard week at work. Meanwhile, he's constantly stressed about money. He'll complain about being broke while wearing designer shoes that cost more than most people's rent. He'll post Instagram stories from expensive restaurants while simultaneously asking family members for loans to cover his utilities. This pattern has been going on for 2 years now. Every few months, Marcus calls me in a panic saying he's short on rent and needs help. The first few times, I lent him money because I thought he was going through a rough patch. But I started noticing that these financial emergencies always happened right after he'd posted pictures from some expensive night out. The amounts kept getting bigger too. It started with 100 here and there, then 300, then 500. He always promises to pay me back, but somehow there's always another emergency before he can repay the previous loan. I've probably given him over $3,000 in the past year, and I've seen maybe 200 of it back. Last month was the final straw. Marcus called me crying, saying he was going to be evicted if he didn't come up with $1,200 for rent by the end of the week. He said he'd been working extra hours but still came up short, and he needed family to help him avoid homelessness. I felt terrible for him and was about to agree when I checked his social media. The night before he called me, he'd posted videos from some exclusive club downtown. He He was buying drinks for a table full of people, showing off expensive bottles, acting like money was no object. The cover charge alone for that club probably would have covered half his rent. That's when I finally said no. I told Marcus that I couldn't keep lending him money when he was clearly prioritising partying over paying his bills. I explained that giving him rent money while he spent his own money on luxury items wasn't helping him. It was enabling his irresponsible behaviour. Marcus completely lost it. He said I was abandoning him when he needed help most and that I clearly didn't understand how much stress he was under. He claimed that his social media posts were misleading and that other people had paid for everything. When I pointed out specific purchases he'd made, he said I was stalking his accounts and judging him unfairly. He started calling other family members, telling them I'd refused to help him avoid eviction. Suddenly I was getting calls from aunts and uncles saying I should help Marcus because family sticks together. My grandmother called me in tears, begging me to loan him the money because she couldn't bear the thought of him being homeless. Nobody seemed interested in hearing about the $3,000 I'd already given him, or the fact that his financial problems were entirely self-created. They just focused on the fact that I had money in savings and Marcus needed help, so clearly I should be the solution to his problems. My mum took Marcus's side, saying that everyone makes mistakes with money when they're young and that I should be more understanding. She reminded me that Marcus had helped me move apartments last year and that family members should support each other through difficult times. The guilt trip intensified when Marcus started posting about his struggles on social media. He wrote these long posts about how hard it is to make ends meet and how disappointed he was in people he thought cared about him. He never mentioned me by name, but everyone knew who he was talking about. Marcus ended up borrowing money from our uncle to cover his rent, which just reinforced everyone's belief that I should have helped in the first place. My uncle made several comments about how some people have money saved up, but won't share it with family members who are struggling. The whole situation has created this weird dynamic where I'm the bad guy for refusing to enable someone's terrible spending habits. Marcus continues to live the same lifestyle, posting pictures from expensive events while complaining about money. But now, everyone acts like I'm selfish for not wanting to subsidize his choices. Last week, Marcus posted pictures from a weekend trip to Las Vegas, while simultaneously sharing articles about the struggles of young people trying to afford rent. The cognitive dissonance is incredible, but somehow I'm still the villain for not wanting to fund his lifestyle. That story ends there, and honestly, this is textbook financial manipulation, disguised as family emergency. Marcus has turned OP into his personal ATM, while continuing to blow money on luxury items, then plays victim when the free money stops flowing. The family pressure just makes it worse because they're enabling his behaviour instead of holding him accountable. You can't help someone who refuses to help themselves, and Marcus clearly has no intention of changing his spending habits as long as other people will cover his responsibilities. Our next story shows what happens when someone thinks your hard work should become their payday. Am I the bad person for refusing to share my bonus with my girlfriend? I've been working at this tech company for 3 years, and for the past 2 months, I've been putting in serious overtime to finish this massive project. We're talking 60-hour weeks, working weekends, missing social events, basically living at the office. The project was a huge success, and last week, my boss surprised me with a $5,000 bonus. I was over the moon because this money is going to help me finally build up my emergency fund and maybe even start saving for a house down payment. When I told my girlfriend Sarah about the bonus, her first response wasn't congratulations or pride in my hard work. It was asking how we were going to spend it. Not how I was going to spend it, how we were going to spend it. She immediately started talking about this vacation she'd been wanting to take and some furniture she thought we needed for the apartment. I explained that I wanted to put most of the money into savings since I'd worked so hard for it and had specific financial goals. Sarah got quiet for a minute, then said she thought we were building a future together and that meant sharing financial windfalls, She pointed out that she'd been supportive during all those long work weeks, that she'd eaten dinner alone most nights, and had to cancel plans because I was always at the office. She said she deserved to benefit from my success, since she'd made sacrifices too. I tried to explain that her being understanding about my work schedule wasn't the same as her actually earning the money. I worked the extra hours, dealt with the stress, and sacrificed my free time to make this project successful. The bonus was a reward for my individual effort and dedication. Sarah got more upset and said I was being selfish. She argued that since we live together and share expenses, any extra money should be treated as household income. She said that's how couples are supposed to work, especially when they're serious about each other. I offered to use some of the money to take her out for a nice dinner and maybe buy something small we both wanted, but she said that wasn't the point. She wanted us to make the decision together about how to spend the entire amount because that's what partners do. The argument escalated when she accused me of not seeing her as an equal partner in our relationship. She said that keeping the bonus money separate proved that I saw our finances as completely individual rather than shared. She claimed I was acting like a roommate instead of a boyfriend. I pointed out that we've been together for 18 months, not married, and we don't have joint bank accounts or shared financial goals. I said I was happy to discuss our future and how we might handle money as we get more serious, but that this bonus was specifically for work I'd done. Sarah started crying and said she felt like she wasn't important enough to share in my success. She brought up all the times she'd ordered takeout for both of us when I was working late, how she'd handled more of the household chores during my busy period, and how she'd been emotionally supportive when I was stressed. She said she wasn't asking for half the money, just for us to make decisions together about how to use it for our shared benefit. She suggested we could use some for the vacation, some for improving our living space, and some for savings. She made it sound completely reasonable, but something about her assumption that she had any claim to money I'd earned through overtime work really bothered me. I worked those extra 20 hours a week for 2 months straight. I dealt with impossible deadlines and difficult clients. The bonus was recognition of my individual contribution to the project. Sarah has been giving me the cold shoulder for a week now. She keeps making comments about how I obviously don't see us as a real team and that she's learning a lot about my priorities. She told her friends about the situation, and now they're all weighing in on social media about how couples should share everything. Her sister called me yesterday, saying that Sarah has been really hurt by my decision and that maybe I should reconsider if I want the relationship to work. She said that refusing to share the bonus sends the message that I don't value Sarah's support and partnership. I'm starting to wonder if I'm being too rigid about this. Sarah did make sacrifices during my busy period, and she's been supportive of my career goals. Maybe sharing some of the windfall would show that I appreciate her and see us as a team. But I also worked really hard for this money, and I have my own financial goals that this bonus could help me achieve. I don't want to set a precedent where any money I earn through extra effort automatically becomes joint funds before we're even engaged or married. That story ends there, and honestly, Sarah's entitlement here is pretty shocking. Supporting your partner through busy work periods is what you do in relationships, not something you get paid for later. The fact that she immediately started planning how to spend money, she didn't earn shows. This is more about wanting access to his success than actually being a supportive partner. OP worked those brutal hours and deserves to decide how his bonus gets used. Here's another story about family members who think your personal property comes with shared custody rights. Am I the bad person for not inviting my aunt to my wedding? My Aunt Linda has been a source of drama in our family for as long as I can remember. She has this ability to turn any gathering into a disaster with her constant negativity and need to be the centre of attention. The breaking point happened at my sister's wedding 2 years ago. Linda spent the entire reception making snide comments about everything from the decorations to the food to my sister's dress. She cornered guests to complain about how expensive weddings are these days and how young people don't understand the value of money. During my sister's first dance, Linda actually stood up and started taking flash photos with her phone, completely disrupting the moment. When the wedding planner asked her to sit down, Linda made a huge scene about being discriminated against and how she had every right to take pictures of her niece. The worst part came during the speeches. My dad was giving this beautiful toast about my sister and her new husband, talking about love and family and hopes for their future. Linda interrupted him halfway through to make some joke about how marriage never lasts anyway, and that they should enjoy it while they can. My sister was in tears, my parents were mortified, and half the guests were staring in shock. Linda seemed to think she was being funny and couldn't understand why everyone was upset. She spent the rest of the night complaining that people can't take a joke anymore. After that disaster, I made the decision that Linda wouldn't be invited to my wedding. I'm not willing to risk her ruining what's supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I want to celebrate with people who actually support my relationship and can behave appropriately at formal events. When I told my mum about my decision, she begged me to reconsider. She said Linda would be devastated if she wasn't included and that family should forgive each other's flaws. She pointed out that Linda doesn't mean to cause trouble. She just doesn't have good social filters. My dad understood my position but worried about the family drama that would result from excluding Linda. He said she'd probably make my wedding about her exclusion rather than just staying away quietly. He suggested maybe inviting her but having someone assigned to manage her behaviour. I stood firm on my decision. I told my parents that I wasn't willing to spend my wedding day worrying about what Linda might say or do next. I explained that I wanted to focus on celebrating with my fiancé rather than managing a family member who consistently causes problems. Linda found out about not being invited through my cousin, who accidentally mentioned wedding details during a family phone call. Linda called me immediately, crying and asking what she'd done wrong. She said she couldn't believe I would exclude her from such an important family event. When I explained that her behaviour at my sister's wedding had been inappropriate, Linda got defensive. She said she was just trying to lighten the mood and that everyone was being too sensitive. She claimed she had no memory of interrupting the speeches or causing any disruption. Linda started calling other family members to complain about being excluded. She told everyone that I was holding a grudge over nothing and that she was being punished for having a sense of humour. She painted herself as the victim of a family conspiracy to isolate her. My grandmother called me in tears, saying that Linda was heartbroken and that weddings are supposed to bring families together, not divide them. She begged me to invite Linda and promised that she would personally make sure Linda behaved appropriately. Several aunts and uncles have reached out saying that excluding Linda is cruel and that I'm creating unnecessary drama. They keep saying that family forgives family and that Linda's quirks are just part of who she is. They act like I should accept her disruptive behaviour as normal. My cousin suggested a compromise where Linda could come to the ceremony but not the reception, or maybe she could attend the reception but not give a speech or participate in formal activities. She said there had to be some middle ground that would include Linda while protecting my special day. Linda has been posting passive-aggressive messages on social media about how some people forget where they came from and abandon family when it's convenient. She shares articles about the importance of family unity and forgiveness, obviously directed at me. The pressure is really getting to me. Part of me feels guilty for excluding a family member from such an important event, but another part of me remembers sitting at my sister's wedding, watching Linda turn what should have been a beautiful moment into an embarrassing spectacle. My fiancé supports my decision completely. He was at my sister's wedding and saw firsthand how Linda's behaviour affected everyone. He said our wedding day is about us, and we shouldn't have to worry about managing someone else's bad behaviour. But the family guilt is intense. Every conversation with relatives becomes a discussion about Linda and whether I'm being too harsh. Some people are threatening not to attend if Linda isn't invited, which would create even more family drama. I keep going back and forth between standing firm and just inviting her to keep the peace. But then I remember my sister's face when Linda interrupted that beautiful speech, and I know I'm making the right choice for my wedding day. That story wraps up there, and wow, Linda really thinks ruining one wedding earns her the right to potentially ruin another one. The fact that she has zero memory of her terrible behaviour shows she either doesn't care about the impact she has, or she's completely delusional about her own actions. OP shouldn't have to hire security for their own family member at their wedding. Sometimes protecting your special day means making hard choices about who deserves to be there. Let's move into another story about someone whose generosity got mistaken for a permanent free service. Am I the bad person for refusing to let my sister borrow my car? My sister Jessica has a pretty terrible track record when it comes to vehicles. In the past 3 years, she's been in 2 accidents that were completely her fault, and she currently doesn't have car insurance because she says it's too expensive. The first accident happened when she rear-ended someone at a red light because she was texting. The second one was when she tried to parallel park and scraped the entire side of her car against a fire hydrant. Both times she had to pay out of pocket for repairs because she'd let her insurance lapse. Despite this history, Jessica called me last week asking to borrow my car for a job interview. She said her current car was making weird noises and she was afraid it would break down on the way to this important meeting. She promised she'd be super careful and that it would only be for a few hours. I told her I wasn't comfortable lending my car to someone without insurance, especially given her accident history. I suggested she could take an Uber to the interview or ask our parents for a ride. Jessica got upset and said I was being paranoid and holding past mistakes against her. She argued that the accidents were just bad luck and that she's a better driver now. She said she really needed this job and that my refusal to help could cost her this opportunity. She made it sound like I was sabotaging her career prospects over something minor. I explained that it wasn't about trust, it was about liability. If she got into an accident while driving my car, I could be held responsible for damages since she doesn't have insurance. I told her I'd worked hard to maintain good credits and insurance rates, and I wasn't willing to risk that. Jessica started crying and said she couldn't believe her own sister wouldn't help her when she was trying to get her life together. She brought up times when I'd borrowed things from her in the past and said I was being hypocritical. She claimed I was punishing her for being in a difficult financial situation. Our mum got involved after Jessica called her complaining about my refusal to help. Mum said I was being selfish and that family should support each other during hard times. She pointed out that Jessica really needs this job and that I should be willing to take a small risk to help my sister succeed. I tried explaining the insurance liability issue to my mum, but she said I was overthinking things and that Jessica would be careful. She suggested that maybe I could drive Jessica to the interview myself if I was so worried about the car, but I had to work that day. Jessica then started telling other family members that I'd refused to help her get a job, conveniently leaving out the part about her not having insurance and her accident history. Suddenly, I was getting calls from aunts and cousins saying I should be more supportive of my sister's efforts to improve her situation. My dad called to say that while he understood my concerns about insurance, maybe I could make an exception just this once since the job was so important. He said Jessica had promised to be extra careful and that she'd learned from her previous mistakes. The guilt trip intensified when Jessica posted on social media about how hard it is to get ahead when people don't believe in you. She shared articles about the importance of family support and how small acts of kindness can change someone's life. Everyone knew she was talking about me. Jessica's friends started commenting on her posts about how terrible it is when family members abandon you during tough times. Some of them sent me direct messages saying I should reconsider helping my sister when she's trying so hard to get back on her feet. The pressure got so intense that I almost gave in. But then I talked to my insurance agent, who confirmed that I could be held liable for any accidents Jessica caused while driving my car, especially since she's uninsured. The potential financial consequences were way too serious to ignore. I offered to pay for Jessica's Uber to the interview instead, but she said that wasn't the same as showing faith in her driving abilities. She claimed that my refusal to lend the car proved that I didn't trust her and that I was treating her like a child. Jessica ended up getting a ride from a friend and actually got the job, but instead of being grateful for the outcome, she's still angry with me for not helping when she asked. She says my lack of support during her time of need showed her who I really am as a person. She's been cold toward me ever since, making passive-aggressive comments about how some people only care about themselves. At family gatherings, she'll make jokes about how I'm too attached to my possessions to help family members. The whole situation has created tension at family events. People keep bringing up the car situation and questioning whether I made the right choice. Some relatives think I should have helped regardless of the risk, while others understand my position about the insurance liability. I feel bad that Jessica interpreted my refusal as a lack of faith in her, but I also think I made the responsible choice given her driving history and insurance situation. I just wish the family drama would die down and that Jessica would understand I wasn't trying to hurt her. That story ends there, and honestly, Jessica's track record speaks for itself. 2 accidents in 3 years plus no insurance equals a massive liability risk that no reasonable person should take on. The fact that she got the job anyway proves OP's concerns were valid and that there were other solutions available. Sometimes protecting yourself financially has to come before family feelings, especially when those family members have proven they can't handle responsibility. Our next story involves someone who discovered that doing one favour for a roommate can turn your entire living situation toxic. Am I the bad person for throwing out my roommate's rotten food? I live with this guy named Brad, who has absolutely zero sense of food safety or cleanliness. This has been an ongoing issue for the 8 months we've been roommates, but last week it reached a breaking point that I couldn't ignore anymore. Brad will buy groceries and then just forget about them completely. I've watched him put raw chicken in the fridge and leave it there for weeks without even checking on it. He'll buy produce that rots into liquid before he remembers it exists. Our refrigerator constantly smells like a garbage dump because of his expired food. I've tried talking to him about it multiple times. I've suggested we do weekly fridge cleanouts together, offered to help him meal prep so food doesn't go to waste, even bought him a whiteboard to track expiration dates. Nothing works. He just nods along and then continues the same disgusting habits. Last week was the final straw. Brad had put a package of raw chicken in the fridge and apparently completely forgotten about it. I noticed it on Monday and figured he'd deal with it soon. By Wednesday, the smell was getting noticeable. By Friday, it was absolutely revolting. The chicken had been in there for almost 3 weeks. The package was leaking bloody liquid all over the refrigerator shelf, and the smell was so bad that I couldn't even open the fridge without gagging. It was contaminating everything else in there and making our entire apartment smell like death. I tried calling Brad to ask him to come home and deal with it, but he didn't answer his phone. I texted him about the situation and got no response. Meanwhile, I couldn't use my own kitchen because the smell was so overwhelming that I couldn't even make myself food. After waiting until Saturday morning with no response from Brad, I decided I had to take action. I couldn't live with that rotting meat poisoning our entire living space for another day. I put on rubber gloves, held my breath, and threw the disgusting chicken package in the outside dumpster. I also had to throw away several other items that had been contaminated by the leaking chicken juice. Some of my own food got ruined because the smell and bacteria had spread throughout the refrigerator. I spent 2 hours scrubbing and disinfecting every surface. When Brad came home Sunday evening, he immediately went to the fridge looking for his chicken. When he couldn't find it, he asked where it was. I explained that it had been rotting for 3 weeks and had become a health hazard, so I'd thrown it away. Brad completely exploded. He started screaming about how I had no right to throw away his food and that I'd stolen his property. He said the chicken was expensive and that I owed him money to replace it. He acted like I'd committed some terrible crime instead of cleaning up his disgusting mess. I tried explaining that the chicken had been spoiled for weeks and was contaminating our entire refrigerator, but Brad said that wasn't my decision to make. He claimed he was planning to cook it that weekend and that I'd ruined his meal prep plans. The idea that anyone would eat chicken that had been rotting for 3 weeks was so insane that I didn't even know how to respond. I told Brad that the chicken could have made him seriously sick, and that leaving raw meat in the fridge for weeks was dangerous and disgusting. Brad said I was being dramatic and that food doesn't go bad as quickly as I think it does. He claimed I was just being prissy about normal food storage, and that plenty of people keep meat in the fridge for weeks. He said my standards were unreasonable and controlling. He started telling our friends about how I'd thrown away his food without permission, conveniently leaving out the part about it being rotten for weeks. Several people reached out asking why I'd thrown away Brad's groceries, and I had to explain the full disgusting situation. Most people were horrified when they heard the details and completely supported my decision to throw away the biohazard that was festering in our refrigerator. But Brad had already painted me as the bad guy who'ls roommates' food. People still so thought some I'd overstepped. Brad has been passive-aggressive ever since, making comments about how he can't trust me around his belongings and that I'm controlling and judgmental. He started keeping all his food in a mini fridge in his bedroom, which honestly is probably better for everyone involved. He's also been leaving bigger messes in common areas, like he's trying to prove some point about cleanliness standards. Last night he left dirty dishes in the sink for 3 days straight, and when I asked him to clean them, he said maybe I should throw them away too, since I like getting rid of his stuff so much. The whole living situation has become incredibly tense. Brad acts like I violated his trust and privacy by throwing away his rotten food, while I think he's being completely unreasonable about basic health and safety standards. Our lease doesn't end for another 6 months, and I'm starting to wonder if I should look for a new place to live. The over-cleanliness issue's constant tension is making our apartment feel hostile and uncomfortable. I keep second-guessing whether I should have just dealt with the smell for longer and it himself waited for Brad to handle. But then I remember how disgusting that chicken was and how it was making our entire living space uninhabitable. That story ends there, and honestly, Brad is absolutely delusional if he thinks 3-week-old raw chicken is still edible. OP probably saved him from serious food poisoning, and instead of being grateful, he's throwing a tantrum about his stolen biohazard. Living with someone who thinks rotten meat is acceptable, food storage sounds like an actual nightmare. The fact that he's now messier out being even of spite shows this was never really about the chicken. It was about control and basic adult responsibilities. Let's dive into another story about family obligations and the guilt trips that come with them. Am I the bad person for refusing to visit my grandma in the hospital? This is a situation that's been eating at me for weeks, and my family's making me feel like the worst person alive. My grandmother is 87 and has been in the hospital for about a month now after a bad fall. She broke her hip and has been recovering from surgery, but the doctors say she's doing well and should be able to go home soon. Here's the thing though, my grandma and I have never had what you'd call a close relationship. She's always been pretty critical of me and my life choices. Growing up, she'd make comments about my weight, my grades, my friends, basically everything. When I came out as gay in college, she didn't speak to me for 2 years. Even when we reconciled, things were always tense between us. She'd make passive-aggressive comments at family gatherings about how I never call or visit enough. But honestly, I didn't enjoy being around someone who constantly made me feel inadequate. When she got hurt, my cousins immediately started organising hospital visits and creating this whole schedule so someone would be there with her every day. They assumed I'd participate and put me down for several time slots without even asking me first. I told them I wasn't comfortable with that arrangement. I explained that Grandma and I don't have a close relationship and that my presence probably wouldn't be comforting for either of us. I suggested that since they're so much closer to her, they should handle the visits. My cousin Rachel completely lost it. She said I was heartless and selfish for abandoning Grandma when she's vulnerable and scared. She brought up all the times Grandma had helped our family when we were kids, like babysitting us during school breaks and making sure we had Christmas presents, even when money was tight. The guilt trips intensified when my uncle got involved. He called me saying that Grandma had been asking why I hadn't visited and that she seemed hurt by my absence. He said this might be one of the last chances I have to spend time with her and that I'd regret not being there if something happened. My mum tried to stay neutral at first, but eventually she sided with the rest of the family. She said that regardless of our past issues, Grandma's elderly and alone in the hospital, and that visiting her is just basic human decency. She reminded me that Grandma raised 6 kids mostly by herself and deserves respect in her final years. The pressure got so intense that I almost gave in and went to the hospital. But then I remembered how Grandma treated me at my cousin's wedding last year. She made several comments about how I'd never give her great-grandchildren and how disappointed she was that I'd chosen such a difficult lifestyle. I decided to stick to my decision not to visit. I sent flowers and a card wishing her a speedy recovery, but I didn't go see her in person. I figured that was a reasonable compromise that showed I cared about her well-being without subjecting either of us to an uncomfortable interaction. The family reaction was swift and brutal. My cousin started posting on social media about the importance of family and how some people forget where they came from. They shared photos from their hospital visits with captions about being there for the people who matter most. Rachel sent me a long text saying that Grandma had cried when she realised I wasn't coming to visit. She said I was breaking an old woman's heart during what might be her final hospital stay. She accused me of holding grudges and being unable to forgive past hurts. My uncle called me again, this time much angrier. He said that Grandma had specifically asked him why her grandson didn't love her enough to visit her in the hospital. He told me that my behaviour was causing her additional stress during her recovery and that I should be ashamed of myself. Even my dad, who usually stays out of family drama, reached out to say that maybe I should reconsider. He acknowledged that Grandma could be difficult, but he said that visiting someone in the hospital isn't about your relationship with them. It's about showing basic compassion for a fellow human being who's suffering. The worst part is that several family members have started treating me like I'm dead to them. My aunt won't return my calls, and my cousins have stopped inviting me to family gatherings. They act like I've committed some unforgivable sin by refusing to visit an elderly woman in the hospital. Grandma ended up going home after 6 weeks, and she's doing well physically, but according to my family, she's been telling everyone how hurt she was that one of her grandchildren couldn't be bothered to visit her during her time of need. Now there's this permanent tension at every family event. People make pointed comments about loyalty and family values, obviously directed at me. Some relatives have stopped speaking to me entirely, while others give me disappointed looks whenever they see me. I keep wondering if I made the right choice. Part of me feels guilty that I caused Grandma pain during a difficult time in her life, but another part of me thinks that I shouldn't have to subject myself to someone who's consistently made me feel unwelcome and criticised just because she's in the hospital. My friends support my decision and say that I can't force a relationship that was never really there in the first place. They point out that visiting someone out of obligation, when there's no genuine affection involved, is pretty hollow anyway. But the family pressure is overwhelming. Every conversation becomes about how I failed to show up when it mattered most, and how Grandma will never forget that I wasn't there for her. That story comes to an end there, and honestly, this is such a complicated situation, because hospital visits shouldn't be performed out of guilt and obligation. If Grandma spent years making OP feel unwelcome and criticised, why would her being in the hospital suddenly change that dynamic? The family's basically asking OP to pretend decades of tension don't exist just because Grandma is vulnerable. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do is acknowledge that a relationship was never really there instead of faking it during a crisis. Moving on to another story about family expectations and the pressure to sacrifice your own plans for someone else's big moment. Am I the bad person for not going to my sister's baby shower? My sister Emma lives across the country in California, and she's pregnant with her first baby. She planned her baby shower for last month, and when she sent me the invitation, I was excited to celebrate with her. The problem started when I looked up flight prices. Round-trip tickets from my city to hers were almost $800, plus I'd need a hotel for the weekend and rental car costs. The total expense would have been over $1,000 for a 2-day trip. I'm currently working 2 part-time jobs while finishing my master's degree, and money is incredibly tight. I've been eating ramen noodles and generic cereal for months just to make ends meet. Spending $1,000 on travel would have meant not paying my utilities bill or buying groceries for the rest of the month. I called Emma to explain my financial situation and to apologize for not being able to attend. I disappointed to told her I was really miss such an important celebration and asked if there was any way we could celebrate together when I visit for Christmas instead. Emma's response was not what I expected. She started crying and saying that this was a once-in-a-lifetime event and that I should have found a way to make it work. She said she'd been counting on having her sister there and that my absence would ruin the whole day for her. I tried to explain again that I literally didn't have the money, but Emma said that if I really wanted to be there, I would have started saving months ago when she first announced her pregnancy. She accused me of not prioritizing her and her baby and said that real sisters make sacrifices for each other. Emma suggested that I could put the trip on a credit card and pay it off later. When I explained that I was already carrying credit card debt from school expenses, she said I was making excuses and that this was more important than my financial concerns. She then proposed that I could ask our parents for money to cover the trip costs. I told her that our parents are also struggling financially since Dad's hours got cut at work, and that I couldn't ask them to pay for my travel expenses. Emma got more upset and said I was being selfish, and that everyone else was making the effort to attend her shower. She pointed out that our cousin was flying in from Texas, and that our aunt was driving 6 hours to be there. She said my refusal to attend proved that I didn't care about her or my future niece. The conversation ended with Emma hanging up on me after saying that she was disappointed in who I'd become and that she never thought her own sister would abandon her during such an important time in her life. Our mum called me the next day saying that Emma was heartbroken about my decision not to attend the shower. Mum said she understood my financial constraints, but that maybe I could have found a way to make it work if it was really important to me. When I explained the actual costs involved, Mum seemed shocked by how expensive travel had become. But she still suggested that maybe I could have borrowed money from friends or picked up extra shifts at work to cover the expenses. Emma started posting on social media about how excited she was for people to celebrate her baby, with pointed comments about how some family members apparently had better things to do. She shared articles about the importance of family support during pregnancy and how meaningful it is when loved ones make sacrifices to be present. The baby shower happened without me, and based on the photos Emma posted, it looked like a beautiful celebration. Everyone looked happy and there were tons of gifts and decorations. Part of me felt guilty seeing how special the day was and knowing I wasn't part of it. After the shower, Emma sent me a cold text thanking me for the gift I'd shipped to her house. She said it was nice that I could at least manage that much effort, even if I couldn't be bothered to show up in person. She said the day was perfect despite my absence, but that she'd always remember who was there for her and who wasn't. Our relationship has been strained ever since. Emma barely responds to my texts and hasn't called me once since the shower. When I try to ask about her pregnancy or how she's feeling, she gives short answers and changes the subject. Other family members have weighed in with mixed opinions. Some understand that travel is expensive and that not everyone can afford last-minute trips across the country. Others think I should have found a way to make it work because baby showers are special once-in-a-lifetime events. My cousin who did attend the shower told me that Emma seemed sad during parts of the celebration and that she mentioned several times how much she wished I could have been there. She said Emma had specifically planned some activities that she thought I would enjoy. The guilt is really eating at me. I keep wondering if I should have put the trip on a credit card anyway, even though the debt would have taken months to pay off. Maybe Emma was right that some things are more important than financial stability, but I also feel frustrated that Emma doesn't seem to understand how tight my budget actually is. She has a good job, and her husband makes decent money, so they've never had to choose between paying bills and attending family events. Now I'm worried that our relationship is permanently damaged over this situation. Emma's baby is due in a few months, and I'm afraid she won't even want me to visit when the baby arrives. The thought of missing out on being part of my niece's early life because of this fight is devastating. That story wraps up there, and wow, Emma really expected her struggling sister to go into serious debt for a baby shower. $1,000 might not seem like much to someone with a steady income, but when you're living on ramen and working multiple jobs just to survive, that's absolutely impossible. The fact that Emma suggested credit card debt and borrowing money shows she has zero understanding of real financial hardship. You can't guilt someone into poverty just because you want them at your party. Let's move into another story about workplace dynamics and the expectations people create when you help them once. Am I the bad person for telling my friend she was wrong to propose at my party? I threw a birthday party for myself last weekend at my apartment. I'd been planning it for weeks, sent out invitations, bought decorations, arranged for catering, the whole thing. It was supposed to be a celebration of turning 30, and I was really looking forward to having all my friends together. My friend Kelly has been dating her girlfriend Sarah for about 2 years, and they've been talking about getting engaged for months. Kelly had mentioned that she was planning to propose soon, but I had no idea she was thinking about doing it at my birthday party. The party was going great. Everyone was having a good time, the food was delicious, and people were mingling and catching up. About halfway through the evening, Kelly suddenly stood up and got everyone's attention by tapping her glass with a fork. I figured she was going to give a birthday toast, which would have been really sweet. Instead, Kelly launched into this long speech about love and commitment and finding your soulmate. Then she got down on one knee right in the middle of my living room and proposed to Sarah in front of all my guests. Everyone immediately shifted their attention to Kelly and Sarah. People were crying, taking photos, congratulating the newly engaged couple. Sarah said yes, obviously, and suddenly my birthday party had become an engagement celebration. I felt completely blindsided. This was supposed to be my special day, and Kelly had turned it into her moment without even asking me first. I stood there watching everyone focus on the engagement, while my birthday cake sat forgotten on the kitchen counter. The rest of the party became all about Kelly and Sarah. People were asking to see the ring, talking about wedding plans, taking engagement photos around my apartment. My birthday became secondary to their big news, and several guests actually left early to go celebrate with the newly engaged couple at a bar. After most people had gone home, I pulled Kelly aside and told her that I was hurt. She'd used my birthday party as the setting for her proposal without asking me first. I explained that it felt like she'd hijacked my celebration for her own purposes. Kelly seemed genuinely surprised by my reaction. She said she thought I'd be honoured that she chose my party as the location for such an important moment. She claimed that she'd wanted to share her happiness with all our mutual friends at once, and my party provided the perfect opportunity. I tried to explain that while I was happy for her and Sarah, I felt like she'd taken attention away from my birthday celebration. I said that if she'd asked me beforehand, we could have planned something that honoured both occasions without one overshadowing the other. Kelly got defensive and said I was being selfish and jealous. She accused me of caring more about being the centre of attention than celebrating her engagement. She said she couldn't believe I was making her proposal about me when it was supposed to be a joyful moment. Sarah tried to mediate by saying they were both sorry if the proposal had upset me, but that they were just excited to share their happiness with friends. She suggested that maybe we were all being too emotional and should talk about it when everyone had calmed down. But Kelly wasn't done. She said that real friends would be thrilled to have their party become the setting for such a beautiful proposal. She claimed that I was ruining her engagement joy by complaining about something that should have been a wonderful surprise for everyone. I told Kelly that surprising me with a major life announcement at my own birthday party wasn't the kind of surprise anyone should have to deal with. I said that proposals are incredibly personal moments that deserve their own special celebration, not to be tacked onto someone else's event. Kelly started crying and said she'd thought our friendship was strong enough that I'd want to be part of her special moment. She said she was disappointed in my reaction and that she'd expected more support and excitement from someone who was supposed to be her best friend. The argument escalated until Kelly and Sarah left my apartment, with Kelly saying she couldn't believe how selfish I was being about the whole situation. Several other guests who had overheard the conversation looked uncomfortable and started making excuses to leave as well. Since then, Kelly has been posting all over social media about her engagement, sharing photos from the proposal that all clearly show my apartment and my birthday decorations in the background. She's been tagging mutual friends and talking about how magical the moment was, but she hasn't mentioned that it happened at my birthday party. Some of our mutual friends have reached out to ask what happened between Kelly and me, since they could tell there was tension at the end of the party. When I explain the situation, reactions are mixed. Some people think Kelly should have asked permission first, while others think I'm overreacting to what was meant to be a beautiful moment. My cousin, who was at the party, said she felt awkward when the proposal happened because it was clearly my birthday celebration, and the sudden shift in focus felt inappropriate. She said several guests mentioned to her that they thought the timing was weird, but other friends think I'm being petty and jealous. They say that Kelly and Sarah's engagement is a happy occasion that should be celebrated, and that I'm ruining their joy by complaining about the timing. They argue that having a proposal at my party should make the event more memorable, not less. Kelly and I haven't spoken since the party. She's been posting passive-aggressive things on social media about how some people can't handle other people's happiness and how important it is to surround yourself with supportive friends. I know she's talking about me. I feel torn because I genuinely am happy that Kelly and Sarah are engaged. They're a great couple and I want them to be happy together. But I also feel like Kelly completely disregarded my feelings and hijacked my celebration for her own purposes. Now I'm wondering if I overreacted to the whole situation. Maybe I should have just been gracious about the proposal and celebrated both occasions together. But I can't shake the feeling that Kelly should have asked me first before turning my birthday party into her engagement announcement. That story ends there. And Kelly really thought she could commandeer someone else's celebration without permission and then act shocked when the host wasn't thrilled. Proposals are beautiful, but they're also massive attention magnets that completely change the energy of any event. The fact that Kelly got defensive instead of apologetic when called out shows she knew exactly what she was doing. Birthday parties aren't community property for anyone's major life announcements. Our next story involves family expectations about material possessions and the assumptions people make about what they're entitled to. Am I the bad person for not giving my brother my old laptop? I've been using the same laptop for about 3 years, and it's been great for my work and personal projects. Last month, I finally saved up enough money to buy a newer model, with better specs that I needed for some freelance graphic design work I'd been taking on. When my brother Jake found out I was getting a new laptop, he immediately asked what I was planning to do with my old one. I told him I was thinking about selling it since it was still in good condition and could probably get a decent price for it. Jake seemed surprised and said he'd assumed I would just give it to him since he needed a computer for college. He's a sophomore and has been using our family's ancient desktop that barely functions anymore. He said it would make way more sense for me to help him out rather than sell it to a stranger. I explained that I was planning to use the money from selling the laptop to help cover the cost of my new one. The new laptop was a significant investment for me, and getting a few $100s back by selling the old one would really help with my budget. Jake got upset and said I was being selfish by prioritizing money over helping family. He pointed out that he really needed a computer for his classes and that I was the only one in a position to help him. He said giving him the laptop would be the right thing to do as his older brother. I suggested that Jake could look into used computers online, or maybe ask our parents if they could help him find something affordable. I mentioned that there were plenty of decent laptops available for reasonable prices if he shopped around. But Jake said he shouldn't have to buy a computer when his brother had a perfectly good one sitting unused. He argued that since I was upgrading anyway, giving him the old laptop wouldn't cost me anything and would solve his problem completely. I tried to explain that selling the laptop was part of my financial plan for the upgrade, but Jake said I was being greedy and that family should come before profit. He brought up times when our parents had helped me with expenses when I was in college and said I should pay that generosity forward. When I stood firm on my decision to sell the laptop, Jake got really angry. He said he couldn't believe his own brother would choose money over helping him succeed in school. He claimed that my refusal to help him was going to hurt his grades and potentially his future career prospects. Jake started telling other family members about the situation, painting me as the selfish brother who wouldn't help with his education. Our parents called me to ask why I wasn't willing to give Jake the laptop, since I was getting a new one anyway. I explained my financial reasoning to our parents, but they seemed to think I was being unnecessarily rigid about money. Our mum said that helping Jake with his education should be more important than making a few $100s from selling the laptop. Our dad suggested that maybe I could give Jake the laptop and he would pay me back gradually once he got a part-time job. But Jake hadn't shown any interest in getting a job, and I knew from experience that family loans rarely get repaid in full. The pressure from my family intensified when Jake started posting on social media about how hard college is when you don't have proper technology. He shared articles about the digital divide and how students from low-income families struggle without access to computers. Jake's friends started commenting on his posts about how unfair it is that some people have multiple computers while others can't afford any. Several of them sent me messages saying I should help my brother out instead of being greedy about money. My girlfriend supported my decision to sell the laptop, but even she suggested that maybe I could find a compromise. She proposed that I could sell the laptop for less money to Jake, basically giving him a family discount while still getting some financial benefit. But I felt like any compromise would just validate Jake's assumption that he was entitled to my property just because we're related. I worked hard to save money for my laptop upgrade, and I shouldn't have to sacrifice part of my plan just because my brother wants something for free. Jake has been giving me the cold shoulder for weeks now. He barely speaks to me at family gatherings and makes passive-aggressive comments about how some people only care about themselves. He's been asking our cousins and other relatives for computer recommendations, making sure everyone knows he has to buy his own because his brother won't help. The family drama has been exhausting. Every conversation with relatives somehow turns into a discussion about whether I should have given Jake the laptop. Some people support my right to sell my own property, but others think I'm being unnecessarily harsh with a family member who genuinely needs help. I've started second-guessing my decision because the ongoing tension is affecting my relationship with Jake and causing stress for our whole family. Maybe I should have just given him the laptop to keep the peace, even though it would have cost me financially. But I also think Jake needs to learn that he can't just expect other people to solve his problems for free. He's an adult who should be taking responsibility for his own needs instead of assuming his family will provide everything he wants. The laptop has been sold now, so the decision is final, but the family resentment continues, and I'm not sure when or if Jake will forgive me for not giving him what he felt entitled to receive. That story comes to an end there, and Jake really thought being related to someone automatically gives you rights to their property. The entitlement is incredible here because OP worked and saved for an upgrade, and selling the old laptop was part of making that financially possible. Jake could have gotten a job, applied for student aid, or found other solutions, but instead he decided to guilt-trip his brother and turn the family against him. Sometimes teaching someone they're not entitled to free stuff is more valuable than just giving in to keep the peace. Moving on to another story about the expectations people create when you've helped them before. Am I the bad person for refusing to help my cousin move again? My cousin David has this pattern of moving constantly, and somehow I always get roped into helping him. This is the fourth time in 2 years that he's asked me to spend my entire weekend hauling his stuff from one apartment to another. The first time I helped David move, it was actually kind of fun. We grabbed some other cousins, ordered pizza, and made it into a family event. David had just gotten divorced and was starting over in a smaller place, so everyone was happy to pitch in and help him get settled. But then David moved again 6 months later because he decided he didn't like his neighbours. Then he moved again because he wanted to be closer to his job. Now he's moving for the fourth time because his current rent went up and he found a cheaper place across town. Each time David calls me first because I have a pickup truck and I've helped him before. He acts like my assistance is just expected at this point, not something he needs to ask for politely. Last week he called and said he needed my truck and my help this Saturday, assuming I'd automatically say yes. I told David that I already had plans for the weekend and wouldn't be available to help him move. I'd been looking forward to a quiet weekend at home after working overtime all week, and I really didn't want to spend both days lifting heavy furniture. David got upset and said he was counting on me because I'd helped him move before. He pointed out that he'd already scheduled the moving truck rental based on having my pickup available, and that changing the date would cost him extra money. I explained that I'd helped him move 3 times already in less than 2 years, and that I needed a break from being his unpaid moving crew. I suggested he could hire professional movers or ask some of his friends to help instead of always relying on family, but David said professional movers were too expensive and that most of his friends weren't available on weekends. He claimed that family should help each other and that I was being selfish by refusing when he really needed assistance. I reminded David that moving this frequently was his choice, not some unavoidable circumstance. I pointed out that if he picked apartments more carefully and stayed in them longer, he wouldn't need to move so often and wouldn't need to keep asking people for help. David got defensive and said that his living situations had changed for legitimate reasons, not because he was being picky or irresponsible. He claimed that I was judging his life choices and that refusing to help was just mean-spirited. The conversation got heated when David accused me of being lazy and unhelpful. He said that he'd always been there for family members when they needed assistance, and that he couldn't believe I wouldn't return the favour when he was in he'd helped David when exactly a bind. I asked me with anything, since I couldn't remember any specific instances where he'd gone out of his way to help me or other family members. David got flustered and said that wasn't the point, that family helps family regardless of keeping score. I told David that while I agreed family should help each other, there was a difference between helping during genuine emergencies and enabling someone's poor planning. I said that constantly moving and expecting free labour from relatives every few months wasn't sustainable. David started calling other family members to complain about my refusal to help. He told everyone that I was abandoning him when he needed me most and that he couldn't afford professional movers on his budget. He made it sound like I was being cruel and unreasonable. Our aunt called me to say that David was really stressed about the move and that maybe I should reconsider helping him one more time. She said moving is expensive and that having family support makes a huge difference when you're struggling financially. I explained to our aunt that this was David's 4th move in 2 years and that I'd helped him every previous time. I told her that I was tired of spending my weekends doing free manual labour for someone who seemed to move constantly by choice rather than necessity. Our aunt seemed surprised to learn how many times David had moved recently. She said she hadn't realised it was such a frequent occurrence and that maybe David needed to think more carefully about his housing decisions. But other family members took David's side without knowing the full history. My uncle called to lecture me about helping family members during difficult times. He said that David had always been a good kid and that refusing to help him move was petty and selfish. David ended up having to hire day labourers to help with the move, which cost him several $100s he claimed he couldn't afford. He's been complaining to everyone about the expense and how it could have been avoided if his family had been more supportive. He's been posting passive-aggressive messages on social media about how you find out who your real friends are when you need help. He shares articles about the importance of family loyalty and how some people only care about themselves. The guilt is starting to get to me because I know David is struggling financially and the moving costs were a real burden for him. Part of me wonders if I should have just sucked it up and helped him one more time to avoid all this family drama. But another part of me thinks that constantly bailing David out isn't actually helping him in the long run. If he never faces the full consequences of his decisions to move so frequently, he'll never learn to make better choices about housing. My friends all support my decision and say that David was taking advantage of my generosity. They point out that most people don't move 4 times in 2 years unless there's something seriously wrong with their decision-making process. But my family's divided, and the tension is making holiday gatherings uncomfortable. Some relatives think I should have helped regardless of how many times I'd done it before, while others are starting to question why David moves so much. David and I haven't spoken directly since our argument about the move. He's still angry with me for what he sees as a betrayal during his time of need. I'm frustrated that he expected free labour on demand without considering my own schedule or needs. The whole situation has made me realise that helping family members can become a trap if they start taking your assistance for granted. I want to be supportive, but I also need to protect my own time and energy from people who might be taking advantage. That story wraps up there, and David really turned his moving addiction into everyone else's problem. 4 moves in 2 years isn't bad luck, it's bad planning, and expecting your cousin to sacrifice every weekend to enable your poor decisions is completely unreasonable. The fact that he immediately guilt-tripped the family instead of accepting responsibility shows this was never about genuine need. It was about getting free labour. Sometimes, the most helpful thing you can do is stop helping someone avoid the consequences of their choices. Let's dive into another story about social expectations and the pressure people feel to fund other people's dreams. Am I the bad person for not donating to my friend's GoFundMe? My friend Jessica created a GoFundMe campaign last month, asking for money to fund what she's calling her dream trip to Europe. She wants to backpack through 6 countries for 3 months and is asking friends and family to help make it happen. The GoFundMe page is full of inspirational language about following your dreams and how travel broadens the mind. Jessica talks about how this trip will help her find herself and figure out what she wants to do with her life. She's asking for $8,000 to cover flights, accommodations, food, and activities. When Jessica shared the campaign on social media, she tagged a bunch of friends, including me, basically putting us all on the spot to donate publicly. The post was all about how grateful she'd be for any support and how this trip was going to change her life forever. I didn't donate to the campaign, and honestly, I didn't think much of it at first. Jessica has a decent job and lives with her parents, so it's not like she's facing some kind of financial emergency. This is essentially asking people to fund her vacation because she doesn't want to save up for it herself. A week later, Jessica sent me a direct message asking if I'd seen her GoFundMe and whether I was planning to contribute. She said she'd noticed I hadn't donated yet and wanted to make sure the link was working properly for me. I felt put on the spot because Jessica was clearly expecting me to donate, but I didn't feel comfortable giving money for someone's vacation. I told her that my budget was tight right now and I couldn't contribute, which was partially true since I'm trying to build my emergency fund. Jessica seemed disappointed and said she understood that not everyone could donate large amounts, but that even small contributions would help her reach her goal. She suggested that even $10 or $20 would be meaningful and would show that I supported her dreams. I felt uncomfortable with the continued pressure, so I explained that I prefer to save my charitable donations for actual emergencies or causes rather than funding someone's travel plans. I tried to say it nicely, but I could tell Jessica was hurt by my response. Jessica got defensive and said that personal growth and life experiences were just as important as traditional charities. She argued that investing in someone's dreams and education through travel was actually a form of helping others, not just frivolous spending. She pointed out that I spend money on things like coffee and entertainment, so contributing to her trip shouldn't be any different. She said she was disappointed that someone she considered a close friend wouldn't support something that was so important to her. I tried to explain that there's a difference between spending my own money on my own choices and being asked to fund someone else's wants. I said that while I hoped she'd be able to take her dream trip, I didn't feel obligated to pay for it. The conversation got awkward when Jessica said she was learning a lot about who her real friends were through this fundraising process. She said some people had been incredibly generous and supportive, while others had been disappointing and selfish. After our conversation, Jessica started posting updates about her fundraising progress that felt pointed toward people who hadn't donated. She'd thank specific contributors by name and make comments about how amazing it was to have friends who believed in her dreams. She shared articles about the importance of supporting friends' goals and how successful people invest in each other's growth. She posted inspirational quotes about how you can tell who your real friends are by who shows up when you need them. The social media pressure intensified when Jessica started posting about how close she was to her fundraising goal and how every donation mattered. She'd share screenshots of contributions with messages like, "Only $500 away from making this dream a reality thanks to amazing friends." Or several mutual friends started asking me privately whether I'd contributed to Jessica's campaign. Some of them seemed surprised when I said no, and a few made comments about how it was nice that Jessica had friends willing to support her adventures. I started feeling guilty about not donating, especially when I saw how excited Jessica was getting as her campaign gained momentum. She was posting constantly about her travel research and how grateful she was to everyone who was making her dream possible. But I also felt frustrated that Jessica seemed to expect financial support from friends for what was essentially a luxury vacation. She has the ability to save money for this trip herself if it's truly important to her, but instead she's asking others to fund it. The situation got more awkward when Jessica announced she'd reached her fundraising goal and would be booking her trip soon. She posted a long thank you message listing everyone who had contributed, which obviously didn't include me. Since then, Jessica has been somewhat cold toward me. She's still polite when we see each other, but there's definitely a change in our friendship dynamic. She shares all her travel planning excitement with other people, but doesn't include me in those conversations anymore. I'm starting to wonder if I should have just donated a small amount to maintain the friendship, even though I disagreed with the premise of the campaign. Maybe my principles about not funding other people's vacations aren't worth damaging a relationship over, but I also think it's problematic when people use emotional manipulation and social pressure to fund their personal wants. Jessica could save for this trip herself if she really wanted to go, but instead she's made it other people's responsibility to make her dreams come true. The whole experience has made me realize how complicated social media fundraising can be for friendships. When someone you care about asks for money publicly, saying no feels like you're rejecting them personally rather than just declining a financial request. That story ends there, and Jessica really tried to guilt trip her entire social circle into funding her European vacation. There's something particularly galling about someone who lives rent-free with their parents, asking friends to pay for their backpacking adventure. The passive-aggressive social media campaign and the direct pressure messages show this was never about genuine need. It was about entitlement to other people's money for personal entertainment. GoFundMe is for emergencies and legitimate causes, not for funding someone's wanderlust when they're perfectly capable of saving up themselves. Moving into our next story about relationship expectations and the assumptions people make about shared responsibilities. Am I the bad person for refusing to go to couples therapy? My girlfriend Sarah has been pushing me to go to couples therapy with her for the past few months. She says our relationship has issues that we can't resolve on our own and that professional help would make us stronger as a couple. The thing is, I don't really see the major problems that Sarah is talking about. We argue sometimes, like any couple, but I think our disagreements are pretty normal relationship stuff that we can work through by talking to each other. Sarah disagrees. She says we have communication problems and that we keep having the same fights over and over without resolving anything. She points to arguments we've had about household chores, spending money, and how much time we spend with each other versus with friends. When Sarah first brought up therapy, I said I'd think about it. But the more I considered it, the more I felt like it wasn't necessary. I've never been to therapy before, and I'm not really comfortable with the idea of discussing our private relationship problems with a stranger. I also think that if we need a therapist to fix our relationship problems, maybe that's a sign that we're not compatible rather than something that can be solved with professional intervention. Shouldn't couples who are right for each other be able to work through issues without outside help? Sarah got upset when I shared these thoughts with her. She said I was being closed-minded and that refusing therapy showed I wasn't committed to improving our relationship. She argued that even good couples can benefit from professional guidance and better communication skills. I tried to explain that I'd rather work on our issues ourselves through honest conversation and compromise. I suggested we could set aside time each week to talk through any problems and really listen to each other's perspectives. But Sarah said we'd already tried that approach and it wasn't working. She pointed out that our discussions about problems often turned into arguments and that we tended to go in circles without reaching real solutions. Sarah started researching therapists and sending me profiles of counsellors she thought might be good fits for us. She said she'd found someone who specialised in couples communication and had great reviews from other clients. I felt pressured by Sarah's enthusiasm for therapy and frustrated that she seemed to think our relationship was in crisis when I saw it as going through normal growing pains. I told her I needed more time to think about it before committing to regular therapy sessions. Sarah interpreted my hesitation as resistance and said I was making excuses because I didn't want to do the hard work of improving our relationship. She accused me of being selfish and only caring about my own comfort rather than what might be best for us as a couple. The therapy discussion started affecting other areas of our relationship. Sarah would bring it up during unrelated conversations, saying things like, "This is exactly the kind of communication problem we could work on in therapy whenever we had any disagreement." Sarah's friends started weighing in after she vented to them about my refusal to go to therapy. Several of them told her that my unwillingness to try counselling was a red flag, and that partners who truly cared would be willing to do whatever it takes to make the relationship work. The pressure intensified when Sarah gave me an ultimatum. She said she couldn't continue in a relationship with someone who wasn't willing to work on their issues professionally. She told me I had 2 weeks to decide whether I'd commit to couples therapy or she'd have to reconsider our entire relationship. I felt manipulated by the ultimatum and angry that Sarah was essentially threatening to break up with me if I didn't agree to therapy. I felt manipulated by the ultimatum and angry that Sarah was essentially threatening to break up with me if I didn't agree to something I wasn't comfortable with. I told Sarah that ultimatums weren't healthy and that forcing me into therapy wasn't going to magically fix our relationship if I was going there under duress. I said that if she truly thought our relationship needed professional help to survive, maybe we should consider whether we were actually compatible. Sarah started crying and said she felt like I was giving up on us without even trying. She said she'd researched ways to improve relationships and that therapy was consistently recommended as one of the most effective approaches. She accused me of being stubborn and unwilling to grow. I tried to explain that my reluctance wasn't about being stubborn, but about genuinely believing we could work through our issues ourselves if we both made an effort. I said that paying someone to teach us how to communicate seemed like admitting failure before we'd really tried. The 2-week deadline Sarah gave me is almost up, and I still don't want to go to couples therapy. I feel like she's trying to force a solution that I'm not convinced we need, and I don't think therapy will be effective if one person is only there because they were threatened with a breakup. But I also don't want to lose Sarah over this disagreement. Maybe I should just agree to a few sessions to show that I'm willing to try, even if I don't think it's necessary. The thought of her ending our relationship over my refusal to go to therapy seems extreme, but she seems serious about the ultimatum. I'm torn between standing firm on my boundaries and giving in to keep the relationship intact. Part of me wonders if Sarah is right, and I am being too resistant to getting help, but another part of me feels like she's being controlling by demanding that I participate in something I'm not comfortable with. That story ends there, and honestly, ultimatums in relationships are rarely a good sign, especially when they're about forcing someone into therapy who doesn't want to be there. Sarah might have valid concerns about their communication, but threatening to end the relationship unless he agrees to professional help isn't exactly the healthy approach she's advocating for. Therapy only works when both people genuinely want to be there, not when one person is essentially being held hostage by relationship threats. Let's move on to another story about relationship expectations and personal boundaries. Am I the bad person for not wanting my girlfriend to move in yet? My girlfriend Emma and I have been dating for 2 years, and she's been pushing really hard for us to move in together. She says that after this amount of time, living together is the natural next step, and that most couples our age are already cohabitating. Emma has been dropping hints about moving in together for months, but recently the hints have become direct pressure. She says she's tired of splitting time between 2 apartments, and that combining our living expenses would be financially smart for both of us. The thing is, I'm just not ready for that level of commitment yet. I really enjoy having my own space where I can decompress after work, have friends over without checking with anyone, and just be alone when I need to recharge. Moving in together feels like a huge step that would change everything about how we relate to each other. Emma doesn't understand my hesitation. She says that if I truly loved her and saw a future with her, I'd be excited about the prospect of waking up next to her every day. She claims that my reluctance to live together means I'm not as serious about our relationship as she thought. I've tried explaining that it's not about not loving her or not being serious about us. I just think there's a difference between dating someone and building a shared domestic life with them. Once we live together, there's no going back to having separate spaces, and I want to make sure I'm completely ready for that change. Emma argues that 2 years is plenty of time to know whether you want to live with someone. She points out couples who moved in together much faster and are still happy. She says my need for independence is just fear of commitment disguised as personal preference. The pressure intensified when Emma's lease came up for renewal. Instead of signing for another year, she gave her landlord notice and assumed we'd find a place together. When I told her I still wasn't ready, she had to scramble to find a month-to-month rental that cost significantly more than her previous apartment. Emma was furious about the housing situation and said my indecision had cost her money and stability. She claimed that I'd led her to believe we'd be moving in together soon, even though I'd never actually agreed to any specific timeline. I felt terrible about Emma's housing predicament, but I also felt pressured by her assumption that we'd automatically move in together just because her lease was ending. I offered to help her cover the extra cost of the month-to-month rental, but she said money wasn't the real issue. Emma started questioning everything about our relationship. She said that if I wasn't ready to live together after 2 years, maybe I'd never be ready. She wondered aloud whether I was just wasting her time while she waited for me to grow up and commit to our future. She began comparing our relationship to her friends' relationships, pointing out couples who had moved in together, gotten engaged, or even married in less time than we'd been dating. She made it clear that she felt like we were falling behind some imaginary relationship timeline. Emma's friends started weighing in on the situation after she vented to them about my reluctance to cohabitate. Several of them told her that my hesitation was a red flag, and that men who are truly interested in long-term commitment don't drag their feet about taking next steps. The relationship tension started affecting other areas of our interactions. Emma would make passive-aggressive comments about how nice it must be to have my own space all the time. She'd talk about feeling like she was always the one making effort to spend time together since she had to come to my place, or we had to coordinate between two apartments. Emma gave me another ultimatum last week. She said she needed to know by the end of the month whether I was ready to start looking for apartments together. She explained that she couldn't keep living in uncertainty and needed to make long-term housing plans. I told Emma that ultimatums weren't helping either of us make good decisions about our relationship. I said that I understood her frustration with the timeline, but that rushing into living together because of external pressure didn't seem like the right foundation for domestic partnership. Emma started crying and said she felt like I was stringing her along with promises of someday being ready, while never actually committing to anything concrete. She accused me of being selfish and only thinking about my own comfort while ignoring her needs and relationship goals. I tried to reassure Emma that my hesitation wasn't about not wanting a future with her, but about wanting to make sure we took steps at the right pace for both of us. I suggested that maybe we could spend more time at each other's places to test the waters before making the full commitment to shared housing. But Emma said she was tired of half measures and compromises. She wanted either a firm commitment to moving in together within the next few months, or acknowledgement that we wanted different things from our relationship. The pressure is really getting to me because I do love Emma and I don't want to lose her over this disagreement about timing. But I also feel like rushing into cohabitation to meet her timeline could create problems for us down the road if I'm not genuinely ready for that level of shared living. I keep going back and forth between thinking maybe I should just commit to moving in together and worrying that I'd be making a decision based on fear of losing her, rather than genuine readiness to take that step. Emma deserves someone who's excited about building a life with her, but I also deserve to move at a pace that feels comfortable for me. That story wraps up there, and this is such a tough situation because both people have valid needs that just aren't aligning. Emma wants security and forward momentum after 2 years, which isn't unreasonable, while OP wants to make sure he's genuinely ready for such a big step rather than just going through the motions. The lease situation definitely added pressure that made everything more complicated, but ultimately, you can't force someone to be ready for cohabitation just because it fits your timeline. Sometimes love isn't enough if the pacing is completely mismatched. Moving on to our next story about financial boundaries and relationship expectations. Am I the bad person for refusing to pay for my partner's debt? My girlfriend Lisa and I have been together for about 18 months, and recently she's been asking me to help her pay off credit card debt that she met. She owed before we evens about $12,000 across multiple cards and says the interest payments are killing her budget. Lisa explained that most of her debt came from a period when she was unemployed for several months and had to put everything on credit cards just to survive. She said she'd been trying to pay it down, but the minimum payments were so high that she could barely make progress on the actual balances. When Lisa first mentioned her debt situation, I was sympathetic and offered to help her create a budget to tackle the payments more strategically. I suggested she look into debt consolidation or maybe pick up some freelance work to generate extra income for debt payments. But Lisa said budgeting and side work weren't enough to make a real dent in the debt. She asked if I would consider helping her pay it off, since I make more money than she does and have savings in the bank. She said it would be an investment in our future together, since her debt stress was affecting our relationship. I told Lisa that I wasn't comfortable taking on responsibility for debt that she'd incurred before we were together. I explained that while I wanted to support her, paying off someone else's financial obligations felt like a boundary I shouldn't cross in a relationship that was still relatively new. Lisa got upset and said she wasn't asking for charity, but for help from someone who claimed to care about her well-being. She pointed out that my refusal to help meant she'd continue struggling with debt payments that left her with very little money for dating activities or shared expenses. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not caring, but about maintaining healthy financial boundaries. I said that taking on her debt would create an imbalance in our relationship that could cause resentment on both sides later on. But Lisa said that people who are building a life together should be willing to help each other through financial difficulties. She argued that my unwillingness to help proved that I didn't see us as a real partnership, or that I was being selfish with money. Lisa started bringing up the debt situation regularly, mentioning how stressed she was about the payments, and how much easier things would be if she could just get some help from someone who had the means to assist her. She'd make comments about how some people hoard money while others struggle. The pressure intensified when Lisa suggested I could just pay off one of her smaller cards to give her some breathing room. She said it would only be about $3,000 and would help her feel like I was genuinely supportive of her financial recovery. I still said no, explaining that the amount didn't matter as much as the principle of taking on someone else's pre-existing debt. I offered to help her research debt management programs, or maybe co-sign for a consolidation loan if she qualified, but I wasn't willing to directly pay her debts. Lisa accused me of being stingy and unsupportive. She said that if the situation were reversed, she'd do everything she could to help me get out of debt, because that's what people who love each other do for one another. She started comparing our relationship to other couples she knew, pointing out friends whose partners had helped them with major expenses or financial emergencies. She made it sound like my refusal to pay her debt was abnormal and selfish. Lisa's financial stress started affecting our relationship in other ways. She'd decline invitations to go out because she couldn't afford her share, then make comments about how I could afford to cover both of us, but chose not to. She'd talk about feeling trapped by her debt while dating someone who had the power to free her, but wouldn't. The situation got more complicated when Lisa missed a credit card payment and her interest rate increased. She was devastated and said this proved that she needed help from someone who cared about her, not just advice about budgeting and debt management strategies. I offered to lend her money for that specific payment to avoid late fees, but Lisa said a loan wasn't what she needed since she was already drowning in debt. She wanted the money as a gift that would actually reduce her financial burden rather than adding to it. Lisa started giving me the cold shoulder when I maintained my position about not paying off her debt. She said she was disappointed in my priorities and that my refusal showed I wasn't the kind of partner she thought I was. She began making passive-aggressive comments about how nice it must be to have savings while your girlfriend struggles with debt payments. She'd talk about friends whose boyfriends had made financial sacrifices to help them, contrasting their generosity with my selfishness. The relationship tension has been building for weeks now, with Lisa becoming increasingly resentful about my refusal to help with her debt. She says she can't understand how someone who claims to love her wouldn't want to help her achieve financial freedom. I feel bad that Lisa is struggling with debt stress, but I also think that paying off someone's pre-existing financial obligations after 18 months of dating sets a precedent that I'm not comfortable with. I'm worried that helping her now would create expectations for future financial assistance that could damage our relationship dynamics. That story ends there, and Lisa really thought 18 months of dating entitled her to $12,000 in debt relief. That's not asking for help. That's asking someone to become financially responsible for choices they had no part in making. The guilt trips and comparisons to other couples show this was never about genuine partnership. It was about finding someone to solve her money problems. Financial boundaries exist for good reason, and OP was smart to maintain them instead of getting pulled into someone else's debt spiral. Let's move on to another story about seemingly small requests that reveal bigger issues. Am I the bad person for not sharing my Netflix password with my brother? This might sound petty, but my brother Jake has been asking me for my Netflix password for months, and I keep saying no. He already uses my Spotify account, and I'm getting tired of sharing all my streaming subscriptions with him. Jake moved back in with our parents 6 months ago after losing his job, and he's been asking family members for access to various services and subscriptions instead of paying for his own. He uses Mom's Amazon Prime, Dad's Hulu account, and now he wants my Netflix login too. When I told Jake I didn't want to share my Netflix password, he acted like I was being incredibly stingy over something that costs less than $20 a month. He said it wouldn't cost me any extra money, and that sharing streaming accounts is what families do to help each other save money. I explained that I've already been letting him use my Spotify Premium account for over a year, which saves him $10 a month. I said I was willing to help him out with one subscription, but I didn't want to become his personal streaming service provider. Jake got upset and said I was being selfish over something so small. He pointed out that Netflix allows multiple users and that I'm not even using all the available profiles on my account. He made it sound like I was hoarding streaming access for no good reason. The thing is, Jake has been unemployed for 6 months, but still finds money for other things he wants. He goes out to bars with friends, buys video games, and even took a weekend trip last month. It bothers me that he'll spend money on entertainment, but expects family members to cover his streaming subscriptions. When I mentioned this to Jake, he got defensive and said that going out occasionally was important for his mental health while job hunting. He claimed that asking for streaming passwords was different because it didn't actually cost me anything extra to share access. I tried to explain that it wasn't really about the money, but about the principle of him expecting free access to everyone else's accounts while still spending his own money on other forms of entertainment. I said it felt like he was taking advantage of family generosity. Jake accused me of being petty and keeping score of every little favour. He said that family members should help each other without worrying about fairness or reciprocity. He made me feel like I was being unnecessarily difficult about something simple. The argument escalated when Jake started telling other family members about my refusal to share my Netflix password. He made it sound like I was being cruel and selfish by denying him access to basic entertainment while he was going through a tough time. Our mum called to ask why I wouldn't just give Jake the password since it wouldn't hurt me to share. She said that Jake was already stressed about being unemployed and that little acts of kindness from family could really help his morale during this difficult period. I tried to explain to Mum that I'd already been sharing my Spotify account with Jake for over a year and that I felt like he was taking advantage of family members' willingness to help. I said I wanted him to take some responsibility for his own entertainment expenses. But Mum said I was being too rigid about money and that family members should support each other during hard times. She suggested that the cost of a Netflix subscription was insignificant compared to maintaining good relationships with my brother. Jake started making passive-aggressive comments whenever we'd watch something on Netflix at family gatherings. He'd mention shows he wanted to see but couldn't access, or talk about how boring it was to only have basic cable at our parents' house. The situation got more awkward when Jake started asking other relatives for streaming passwords. Our uncle gave him access to his Disney Plus account, and our cousin let him use her HBO Max login. Jake would mention these arrangements to me, obviously trying to make me feel like the only family member who wasn't being helpful. I felt pressure to give in and share my Netflix password just to end the ongoing drama and guilt trips. But I also felt frustrated that Jake seemed to think he was entitled to free access to everyone's subscriptions while he was figuring out his employment situation. Jake finally got a new job last month, but he still hasn't offered to get his own streaming subscriptions or pay me back for the year of Spotify access he's been using. He acts like sharing passwords is just a permanent family arrangement that doesn't need to be reevaluated now that his financial situation has improved. The whole experience has made me realize that small favors can turn into long-term expectations if you're not careful about setting boundaries. Jake went from asking for temporary help to treating my subscriptions like shared family resources that he had a right to access indefinitely. That story wraps up there, and Jake really turned asking for help into demanding permanent access to everyone's entertainment accounts. The fact that he's spending money on bars and trips while expecting family to cover his streaming costs shows this was never about genuine financial hardship. Getting one family member's password then systematically working through everyone else's accounts is some next-level mooching behaviour. Sometimes saying no to small requests is actually about preventing much bigger boundary violations down the road. Moving into another workplace story about expectations and personal time boundaries. Am I the bad person for refusing to cover my co-worker's shift on Christmas? My co-worker Derek asked me to cover his Christmas Day shift so he could go to a party with his friends. I told him no because I wanted to spend the holiday with my family, and now he's saying I ruined his plans. Derek and I work at a restaurant that stays open on holidays, which means someone always has to be there to cover the shifts. The holiday schedule was posted a month ago, and Derek was assigned to work Christmas Day while I was scheduled for the day after. When Derek first asked me to switch with him, he said he had important family obligations that came up unexpectedly. I felt bad for him and was considering helping out, even though it would mean missing Christmas dinner with my own family. But then I found out through another co-worker that Derek's family obligation was actually a big Christmas party that his friend group throws every year. He wanted to get drunk and party instead of working his assigned shift, and he was trying to guilt me into covering for him by claiming it was a family emergency. I told Derek I wouldn't switch shifts with him once I learned the truth about his plans. I explained that I had my own Christmas traditions with my family that were important to me, and that covering his party plans didn't seem like a good enough reason to sacrifice my holiday. Derek got angry and said I was being selfish and inflexible. He argued that the reason for needing the shift covered didn't matter, and that co-workers should help each other out when someone needs time off, regardless of what they plan to do with that time. I disagreed and said that there's a difference between covering for genuine emergencies or important family events and covering so someone can party. I told Derek that if partying on Christmas was more important to him than working, he should have requested the day off when the schedule was being made. Derek said I was being judgmental about his social life, and that his Christmas plans were just as valid as mine. He claimed that spending time with friends was important to him, and that I was discriminating against him for not having traditional family holiday celebrations. I tried to explain that it wasn't about judging his social choices, but about prioritizing genuine needs over wants when it comes to shift coverage. I said that if I covered for him every time he wanted to party, I'd never have any personal time because he goes out constantly. Derek started complaining to other co-workers about my refusal to help him out. He told everyone that I was being unreasonable and that he couldn't believe someone would refuse such a simple favour. He made it sound like I was the problem for not being more accommodating. Some of my co-workers sided with Derek and said that shift swapping should be no questions asked as long as both people are qualified to do the work. They argued that what Derek planned to do on his day off wasn't my business and that I should have just helped him out. But other co-workers understood my position and said that Derek should have been more honest about his reasons for needing the shift covered. They pointed out that lying about having a family emergency when you really want to party was manipulative and unfair. Derek's manager got involved when he complained that I was being uncooperative about shift coverage. I had to explain the situation to my boss, including Derek's dishonesty about his reasons for needing the time off. The manager supported my decision not to cover Derek's shift and reminded him that holiday shifts are assigned well in advance specifically so people can plan around them. She said that wanting to party wasn't a valid reason for last-minute shift changes, especially on major holidays. Derek was furious about getting called out by management and blamed me for getting him in trouble. He said I should have just handled it between us instead of involving our boss in what should have been a simple co-worker favour. I pointed out that Derek was the one who had escalated the situation by complaining to other co-workers and trying to pressure me through management. I said that if he'd been honest from the beginning, we might have been able to work something out. Derek ended up having to work his assigned Christmas shift and missed his friend's party. He's been giving me the cold shoulder ever since and makes snide comments about how some people aren't team players when it comes to helping co-workers. The whole situation has created tension at work, with some people thinking I should have just covered the shift regardless of Derek's reasons, while others think Derek was wrong to lie about needing emergency family time when he really wanted to party. I feel bad that Derek missed his friend's party, but I also think he created this problem by being dishonest and trying to manipulate me into giving up my Christmas plans so he could have fun. Working holidays is part of the job, and if you want specific days off, you need to request them properly through official channels. That story ends there, and Derek really thought lying about a family emergency to cover up party plans was going to work out well for him. The entitlement of expecting someone to sacrifice Christmas with their family so you can get drunk with friends is pretty stunning. Plus, trying to guilt trip OP by calling it a simple favour after being caught in a lie just makes it worse. Sometimes people create their own problems by being dishonest and then blame everyone else when it backfires. Let's move on to another story about transportation expectations and workplace boundaries. Am I the bad person for refusing to drive my co-worker home every night? This situation started about 2 months ago when my co-worker Jennifer mentioned that her car was in the shop and she needed a ride home after work. Since we both get off at the same time, and I try to be helpful when I can, I offered to give her a lift for what I thought would be a few days. Those few days turned into 2 weeks, then a month, and now it's been 8 weeks of Jennifer expecting me to drive her home every single night. Her car situation keeps changing. First it needed major repairs, then she decided it wasn't worth fixing. Then she was saving up for a down payment on something newer. The thing is, Jennifer lives about 30 minutes in the completely opposite direction from my house. What used to be a 15-minute drive home has turned into over an hour of driving every day just to drop her off. I'm spending way more on gas, putting extra miles on my car, and getting home much later than I used to. At first, Jennifer was really grateful. She'd offer gas money, bring me coffee in the morning, and constantly thank me for helping her out. But as the weeks went on, she started treating the rides like they were just part of my daily routine, rather than a huge favour I was doing for her. She'd text me throughout the day with updates about what time she'd be ready to leave, like she was coordinating with her personal driver. If I was running a few minutes late finishing up work, she'd come to my desk asking when we could go because she had things to do at home. Last week was the breaking point. Jennifer texted me at lunch saying she needed to stop at the grocery store on the way home, which would add another 20 minutes to our already long drive. She didn't ask if I minded the extra stop, just informed me that we'd need to make a detour. I told her I couldn't do the grocery store run because I had my own errands to handle and needed to get home. Jennifer seemed surprised and said it would only take a few minutes. When I explained that the detour plus the extra shopping time would make my commute even longer than it already was, she got frustrated. That's when I realised how completely out of hand this whole situation had gotten. I told Jennifer that I needed to stop driving her home every day and that she needed to figure out alternative transportation. I suggested ride shares, public transit, or maybe asking other co-workers who lived closer to her neighbourhood. Jennifer was shocked. She said she'd been counting on me for transportation and that suddenly cutting her off would make her life really difficult. She pointed out that driving her home was barely out of my way since we both had to leave the building anyway. I tried to explain that 30 minutes in the opposite direction every single day was actually a huge inconvenience that I'd been dealing with for 2 months. Jennifer seemed genuinely surprised that the drives were such a burden for me, like she'd never considered how much extra time and gas money I was spending. She started telling other co-workers that I was suddenly refusing to help her get home, making it sound like I'd just randomly decided to stop being nice. Several people asked me what had happened between us, and I had to explain that I'd been driving her home for 8 weeks and just needed a break. When people heard the full story, including how far out of my way her house was, most of them understood why I needed to stop. But Jennifer had already painted herself as the victim of my sudden change of heart, so some co-workers still thought I was being unnecessarily harsh. Jennifer tried guilt-tripping me by talking about how expensive ride shares are and how unreliable public transit can be in our area. She said she'd been using the money she saved on transportation to help her elderly parents with their medical bills, making me feel like I was somehow hurting her family by refusing to continue the free rides. She also started timing her departure from work to coincide with mine, then acting surprised to see me in the parking lot. She'd make comments about how she wished she had reliable transportation like some people, or mention how much she was spending on ride shares since I'd stopped helping her. My supervisor noticed the tension between Jennifer and me and asked if everything was okay. When I explained the situation, she was surprised that the rides had been going on for so long and said she understood why I needed to set boundaries about personal favours. Jennifer found another co-worker who lives somewhat near her to give her rides twice a week, but she's still making passive-aggressive comments about people who abandon their friends when it becomes inconvenient. She acts like I betrayed her by stopping a favour that was supposed to be temporary. The whole experience has made me realise how quickly a simple act of kindness can turn into an expectation if you don't set clear boundaries from the beginning. Jennifer went from being grateful for occasional help to treating me like her personal chauffeur service. That story ends there, and Jennifer really thought she could turn a few emergency rides into a permanent taxi service without even acknowledging the massive inconvenience. 30 minutes in the opposite direction every single day for 2 months is absolutely unreasonable. And the fact that she acted shocked when OP finally said enough shows she was completely taking advantage. The grocery store demand was the final straw that broke this particular camel's back. Let's move into another story about tipping culture and the expectations that come with self-service. Am I the bad person for refusing to tip at a self-serve cafe? I went to this new coffee place downtown yesterday that has this setup where you order at a counter, pour your own coffee from dispensers, grab your own pastries from display cases, and basically handle everything yourself except paying. When I got to the register with my coffee and muffin, the cashier rang me up and then turned the payment screen toward me. There was a tip option with suggested amounts of 15, 20, and 25%, plus a custom option and a no-tip button. I was confused because I'd literally done everything myself. I walked to the coffee dispensers, filled my own cup, selected my own food, and brought everything to the counter. The cashier's only job was to take my payment, which took about 30 seconds. I pressed the no-tip button, and the cashier immediately gave me this look of complete disgust. She rolled her eyes and made this huffing sound like I'd personally insulted her. She practically threw my receipt at me and turned away without saying another word. The whole interaction made me feel really uncomfortable because I genuinely didn't understand what service I was supposed to be tipping for. In a regular cafe where someone takes your order, makes your drink, and brings it to your table, tipping makes perfect sense. But this place was designed specifically for customers to serve themselves. I mentioned the situation to a friend who said I was probably being cheap and that service workers deserve tips regardless of the setup. She argued that the cashier still had to deal with customers all day and that tipping is just part of supporting people in service jobs. But another friend said the whole point of self-serve establishments is that they can offer lower prices because customers do most of the work themselves. He thought it was ridiculous to expect tips when no actual service was being provided beyond basic transaction processing. I started second-guessing myself because the cashier's reaction was so hostile. Maybe there's something about cafe culture that I don't understand, or maybe I was supposed to tip for the privilege of using their coffee dispensers and display cases. I looked up the cafe online to see if they had any information about their tipping policy, but there was nothing on their website about gratuities or service charges. The whole business model seemed to be based on self-service convenience. The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I got about being made to feel guilty for not tipping when I'd done all the work myself. I'd walked in, served myself, and paid for my items. The only interaction with staff was the 30-second payment process. I went back to the same cafe this morning to see if my experience was just a one-off situation. This time, a different cashier was working, and I again selected no tip on the payment screen. This cashier didn't react negatively, just smiled and handed me my receipt normally. That made me think the first cashier was just having a bad day or had unrealistic expectations about tips in a self-serve environment. But it also made me wonder how many other customers feel pressured to tip even when no service is actually being provided. The whole thing has made me more aware of how tip screens where traditional are popping up everywhere. Even in situations tipping wouldn't make sense. I've seen them at self-checkout grocery stores, takeout counters, and even automated kiosks. I understand that service workers often depend on tips to make a living wage, and I always tip generously when I receive actual service. But I don't think customers should feel obligated to tip for the privilege of serving themselves, especially when businesses are already saving money by not providing traditional service. That story wraps up there, and the entitlement of expecting tips for literally watching someone serve themselves is pretty wild. The dirty look and attitude, just for pressing the no tip button, shows some people have completely lost perspective on what tipping is actually supposed to reward. Self-serve means you're already paying less because you're doing the work yourself, not paying extra for the privilege of being your own server. Moving on to another relationship story about privacy boundaries and social media oversharing. Am I the bad person for not wanting my partner to share our arguments with friends? My boyfriend Alex has this habit of immediately running to his group chat whenever we have any kind of disagreement or argument. He'll give them a play-by-play of what happened, what we both said, and ask for their opinions on who was right. This has been going on for our entire 8-month relationship, but I only found out about it recently when one of his friends made a comment about something that should have been private between us. We'd had a fight about household chores, and his friend Jake made a joke about how I was being controlling about the dishwasher. When I asked Alex how Jake knew about our argument, he seemed surprised that I was upset. He said he'd just been venting to his friends about the disagreement and that talking through problems with other people helps him process his emotions and figure out the best way to handle situations. I told Alex that I wasn't comfortable with him sharing details of our private conversations and arguments with his friend group. I explained that our relationship issues should stay between us, and that involving other people made me feel exposed and judged by people who only heard his side of the story. Alex got defensive and said that everyone talks to their friends about relationship problems. He argued that getting outside perspectives helps him be a better partner, and that his friends give him good advice about how to handle disagreements with me. I tried to explain that there's a difference between occasionally asking for advice about general relationship issues and giving his friends a detailed account of every argument we have. I said that knowing his friends had heard about our private moments made me feel like I couldn't be authentic or vulnerable with him. Alex said I was being paranoid and controlling by trying to dictate who he could talk to about his problems. He claimed that his friends were supportive and helpful, not judgmental, and that their input actually made our relationship stronger because he learned better communication techniques. The problem is that now, whenever we disagree about something, I find myself wondering if Alex is going to immediately text his group chat about it. I feel like I'm performing for an invisible audience of his friends rather than having genuine conversations with my boyfriend. I asked Alex if he would be comfortable with me sharing details of our arguments with my friends, including things he'd said in private moments when he was angry or upset. He said that would be different because his friends are more mature and objective than mine, which made me even more frustrated. The situation got worse when I realised that Alex's friends probably know more about our relationship dynamics than I know about theirs. They've heard about every fight we've had, every issue I've raised, and every private moment that Alex decided was worth discussing with his group chat. Alex started getting annoyed with me for bringing up the oversharing issue repeatedly. He said I was making a big deal out of nothing, and that if I didn't want him to talk about our problems, maybe I should stop creating problems to talk about. That comment really hurt because it implied that our relationship issues were entirely my fault, and that Alex was just an innocent victim venting to his friends about my unreasonable behaviour. It made me realise that his version of our arguments probably painted me as the difficult one in every situation. I suggested that we could both agree to keep our relationship disputes private unless we genuinely needed outside advice about serious issues. Alex said that was unrealistic because talking to friends is how he processes emotions, and that restricting his communication with his support system wasn't fair. Alex's friends have started treating me differently at group gatherings, like they know things about me that I never consented to share with them. They'll make comments or jokes that reference private conversations I've had with Alex, which makes social situations really uncomfortable. When I mentioned this to Alex, he said I was being oversensitive and reading too much into innocent comments. He claimed that his friends actually like me more because they understand our relationship better through his explanations of our disagreements. The whole situation has made me feel like I can't trust Alex with sensitive information about my feelings or concerns. If I tell him something bothers me, I have to assume that 5 other people are going to know about it within hours. That story ends there, and Alex really thought turning his relationship into group entertainment was totally normal behaviour. The fact that he justified it by saying his friends are more mature than hers shows he's completely missing the point about privacy and respect. Nobody wants to date someone who treats every argument like content for their group chat, especially when you're painted as the villain in every story. Let's move into another story about social obligations and relationship expectations. Am I the bad person for not attending my girlfriend's friend's wedding? My girlfriend Sarah got invited to her college friend Emma's wedding next month, and she automatically assumed I'd be going with her as her +1. The thing is, I've only met Emma maybe 3 times in the 2 years Sarah and I have been dating. Emma lives in another state, and the wedding is going to be a whole weekend affair with multiple events. There's a welcome party Friday night, the ceremony and reception on Saturday, and a farewell brunch on Sunday. Sarah is super excited about celebrating with her college friends and has already booked us a hotel room. When Sarah told me about the wedding weekend, I tried to be supportive but mentioned that I wasn't sure about committing to an entire weekend of events with people I barely know. I said I'd be happy to go to the actual wedding ceremony and reception, but that 3 days of wedding festivities seemed like a lot. Sarah got upset and said that going to Emma's wedding was really important to her. She explained that Emma had been one of her closest friends in college, and that she wanted me to be there to share this special moment with her college friend group. I told Sarah that I understood the wedding was meaningful to her, but that I felt awkward about spending an entire weekend with strangers. I pointed out that I'd only had brief conversations with Emma and didn't really know any of her other college friends either. Sarah said that weddings are great opportunities to get to know people better, and that I was being antisocial by not wanting to participate in her friend's celebration. She argued that as her boyfriend, I should be excited about meeting the people who were important to her. I explained that it wasn't about not wanting to meet her friends, but about feeling uncomfortable being trapped at multiple events where I wouldn't know anyone except Sarah. I said that 3 days of small talk with strangers while pretending to be excited about someone else's wedding sounded exhausting. Sarah accused me of not being supportive of her friendships and said that my refusal to attend made her question how committed I was to being part of her life. She claimed that couples are supposed to participate in each other's social circles and important events. I offered a compromise where I would go to the Saturday ceremony and reception, but skip the Friday welcome party and Sunday brunch. I thought that would show support for Sarah while allowing me to avoid the most awkward social situations. But Sarah said that skipping parts of the weekend would be rude and would make it obvious that I didn't want to be there. She worried that Emma and her other friends would think I was being standoffish, or that Sarah and I were having relationship problems. The argument escalated when Sarah said that if I really loved her, I would be willing to spend one weekend being slightly uncomfortable to support something that was important to her. She made it sound like my reluctance to attend was a reflection of my feelings about our relationship. I tried to explain that my discomfort wasn't about not loving Sarah, but about my own social anxiety and preference for smaller gatherings over big group events. I said that forcing myself to attend wouldn't make me better company and might actually make the weekend less enjoyable for both of us. Sarah started comparing me to her ex-boyfriend, who apparently loved going to social events and meeting new people. She said she was disappointed that I wasn't more outgoing and social like he had been, which really stung. I told Sarah that comparing me to her ex wasn't fair, and that trying to change my personality to match someone else's social preferences wasn't healthy for our relationship. I said that she knew I was more introverted when we started dating, and that expecting me to suddenly become extroverted wasn't realistic. Sarah has been giving me the cold shoulder for the past week, posting pictures on social media of her shopping for wedding guest outfits and talking about how excited she is to celebrate Emma's big day. She's making it clear that she's disappointed in my decision not to attend. Her friends have started weighing in on the situation, with several of them commenting on her posts about how important it is to have supportive partners who participate in your social life. I know these comments are directed at me and my refusal to go to the wedding. The wedding is in 3 weeks and Sarah is still pressuring me to change my mind. She keeps bringing up how hurt Emma will be if I don't attend and how awkward it will be for her to explain my absence to all her college friends. I'm starting to feel guilty about potentially ruining Sarah's experience at her friend's wedding, but I also don't want to spend 3 days being miserable at social events just to avoid conflict. The whole situation has created tension in our relationship that I'm not sure how to resolve. That story ends there, and Sarah really expected her boyfriend to commit an entire weekend to celebrating someone he's met 3 times. The comparison to her ex-boyfriend was particularly brutal because it shows she's trying to change his personality rather than accepting who he is. Sometimes being supportive doesn't mean forcing yourself into every social situation, especially when it involves multiple days of awkward small talk with strangers. Our next story involves academic boundaries and the expectations classmates create around shared resources. Am I the bad person for refusing to take notes for my classmate? There's this girl in my economics class named Lisa who has missed about half the lectures this semester and keeps asking me to share my notes with her. At first, I didn't mind helping out occasionally when she had legitimate reasons for being absent. The problem is that Lisa rarely has actual emergencies or valid excuses for missing class. She'll skip because she stayed up too late partying, because she doesn't feel like getting up early, or because she has plans that conflict with the lecture schedule. Then she expects me to fill her in on everything she missed. Lisa started asking for my notes more frequently as the semester went on. She'd text me after every class she missed, asking if anything important happened and whether I could send her my notes from that day. She acts like I'm her personal note-taking service. Last week, Lisa missed 3 classes in a row and then sent me a long message asking for all my notes from those sessions, plus any handouts the professor distributed. She said she really needed to catch up before the midterm exam and that my notes were always so detailed and helpful. I told Lisa that I couldn't keep sharing my notes every time she decided to skip class. I explained that taking good notes requires focus and effort during lectures, and that constantly providing them to someone who chooses not to attend class felt unfair to me. Lisa got upset and said she thought we were friends and that friends help each other out. She claimed that sharing notes was just basic college courtesy and that I was being selfish by refusing to help a classmate who was struggling. I pointed out that Lisa wasn't struggling because of circumstances beyond her control, but because she was choosing not to attend class regularly. I said that if she made the effort to show up to lectures, she wouldn't need to rely on other people's notes. Lisa argued that everyone has different learning styles and schedules, and that some people can't always make it to every single class. She said that note sharing was a normal part of college life, and that I was being unnecessarily rigid about helping classmates. I explained that I'd be happy to share notes occasionally for genuine emergencies or illness, but that I couldn't be responsible for documenting every class she chose to miss. I suggested that she could form a study group with other students or ask the professor about makeup sessions. Lisa started telling other classmates that I was being mean and uncooperative about sharing notes. She made it sound like I was hoarding information and refusing to help struggling students, which wasn't accurate since she was struggling by choice rather than necessity. Several students approached me asking why I wouldn't help Lisa, and I had to explain that she'd been skipping class regularly and expecting me to provide detailed notes every time. When people heard the full context, most of them understood my position, but some classmates said I was being too harsh and that everyone skips class sometimes. They argued that sharing notes is part of being a good classmate and that I shouldn't judge Lisa for having different attendance patterns than me. Lisa started making passive-aggressive comments during the classes she did attend, mentioning how hard it was to catch up when some people weren't willing to help. She'd ask the professor to repeat information that had been covered in previous classes, obviously trying to get the material she'd missed. The professor noticed that Lisa was frequently absent and that she seemed unprepared for class discussions. During one lecture, she directly addressed the importance of regular attendance and said that students who missed class shouldn't expect classmates to provide comprehensive makeup notes. Lisa was embarrassed by the professor's comments and blamed me for making her look bad. She said that if I'd been more willing to share notes, she wouldn't have seemed so unprepared during class discussions. I told Lisa that her preparation level was a direct result of her attendance choices, not my willingness to share notes. I said that if she wanted to succeed in the class, she needed to take responsibility for showing up and taking her own notes. The midterm exam is next week, and Lisa has been frantically trying to get notes from other classmates since I stopped sharing mine. She's posted in our class group chat asking if anyone has comprehensive notes they're willing to share. A few students have offered to help her, but most people seem to have realised that Lisa's attendance issues are self-created rather than due to legitimate circumstances. The whole situation has made me more aware of how some people try to take advantage of others' academic efforts. That story comes to an end there, and Lisa really thought she could treat college like an optional activity while expecting classmates to do the work of attending for her. The entitlement of skipping half the semester and then demanding comprehensive notes shows she completely misunderstands how education actually works. You can't outsource attendance and engagement to other people and then act shocked when they stop enabling your choices. Let's dive into another workplace story about boundaries and personal time expectations. Am I the bad person for not helping my boss on my day off? My manager Dave has this habit of calling me on weekends and asking me to come in to help with various tasks that come up at our retail store. Last Saturday was supposed to be my first full day off in 2 weeks, and Dave called me 10 times trying to get me to come in. The calls started around 9 in the morning when Dave realised that one of our part-time employees had called in sick and we were going to be short-staffed for the busy Saturday shift. Instead of calling other employees or handling the situation himself, Dave immediately started trying to reach me. I was at home trying to relax and catch up on household chores after working 6 days straight. When I saw Dave's name on my caller ID for the third time in an hour, I decided to just let it go to voicemail. I figured if it was a genuine emergency, he'd leave a message explaining what was wrong. Dave left increasingly frantic voicemails saying that the store was getting busy and that he really needed me to come in for just a few hours to help with customer traffic. He kept emphasizing how much he'd appreciate it and how it would really save the day. By noon, Dave had called me 10 times without me answering. I finally texted him back saying that I was enjoying my scheduled day off and wouldn't be available to come in. I reminded him that I'd worked the previous 6 days and needed time to recharge. Dave responded immediately with a long text about how retail management requires flexibility from everyone and that sometimes we all need to make sacrifices for the team. He said he was disappointed that I wasn't willing to help during a staffing shortage. I replied that staffing emergencies were management responsibilities, not something that employees should be expected to solve on their days off. I pointed out that I'd already worked overtime several times this month and deserved to have my scheduled time off respected. Dave got more frustrated and said that he couldn't believe I was being so inflexible when the store needed help. He claimed that good employees always step up when their team needs them, regardless of whether they're officially scheduled to work. I told Dave that I was a good employee during my scheduled hours, but that my time off was my own and shouldn't be subject to constant work demands. I said that if staffing was such a regular problem, maybe the store needed to hire more people or create better backup plans. Dave said I was being selfish and not thinking about the bigger picture of how the business operates. He argued that everyone occasionally has to work extra hours or come in on days off, and that my refusal to help was letting down the entire team. I explained that there's a difference between occasionally helping during genuine emergencies and being expected to be on call every weekend in case someone else calls in sick. I said that constantly interrupting employees' days off was bad management and unsustainable. The conversation ended with Dave saying he was disappointed in my attitude and that he'd remember my lack of flexibility when it came time for performance reviews and scheduling decisions. I felt like he was essentially threatening my job because I wouldn't sacrifice my day off. When I came back to work on Monday, several co-workers mentioned that Dave had complained about my refusal to help during the weekend staffing crisis. He'd apparently told everyone that some employees don't care about the team and only think about themselves. I found out that Dave had eventually handled the Saturday shift by himself, and that the store had managed fine without me. The crisis he'd made such a big deal about had resolved itself, which proved that calling me 10 times had been unnecessary drama rather than a genuine emergency. Some of my co-workers supported my decision and said they were tired of Dave expecting everyone to be available on their days off. They shared stories about times when he'd pressured them to come in during scheduled time off, creating a pattern of boundary violations that affected multiple employees. But other co-workers said I should have helped out since we're supposed to be a team. They argued that retail work requires flexibility and that sometimes you have to sacrifice personal time to keep the business running smoothly. Dave has been cold toward me all week, making passive-aggressive comments about employees who prioritize their personal lives over work responsibilities. He's been scheduling me for less desirable shifts and hasn't asked for my input on decisions that usually involve team collaboration. I'm starting to worry that my refusal to come in on Saturday has damaged my relationship with Dave permanently. But I also think that setting boundaries about my time off was necessary to prevent him from expecting me to be on call every weekend. The whole situation has made me realize how toxic it can be when managers treat employee availability as unlimited. Dave created an environment where saying no to extra work feels like betraying the team, even when the requests are unreasonable and poorly planned. I've started looking for other job opportunities because I don't want to work for someone who threatens my job security when I exercise basic rights to time off. Dave's reaction to my boundary setting showed me that this workplace doesn't respect employee well-being or work-life balance. That story ends there, and Dave really thought calling someone 10 times on their day off was acceptable management behaviour. The threat about performance reviews and scheduling just proves he's the kind of boss who punishes employees for having boundaries. Good managers plan for staffing shortages instead of harassing people during their time off, and the fact that the store ran fine without OP shows this was manufactured drama rather than a real emergency. Moving on to another relationship story about trust and personal property boundaries. Am I the bad person for refusing to let my boyfriend borrow my laptop? My boyfriend Marcus has been asking to use my laptop for the past few weeks, claiming he needs it for work projects since his computer is supposedly broken. The thing is, I've caught him snooping through my personal stuff before, so I don't really trust him with unsupervised access to my devices. About 3 months ago, I found Marcus going through my text messages while I was in the shower. When I confronted him about it, he said he'd just been checking the time and accidentally saw some messages. But I know he'd been scrolling through conversations because he mentioned details from texts that were several days old. Marcus apologised for the phone incident and promised he'd never invade my privacy again. He said he'd been feeling insecure about our relationship and made a stupid mistake, but that he understood why I was upset and would respect my boundaries going forward. When Marcus first asked to borrow my laptop, I told him I wasn't comfortable with that because of the previous snooping incident. I explained that my laptop contains personal documents, photos, and information that I'd rather keep private, especially given his history of going through my things. Marcus got defensive and said I was holding one mistake against him forever. He argued that his work computer being broken was a legitimate emergency and that refusing to help showed I didn't trust him at all, even after he'd apologised and promised to do better. I suggested Marcus could use the computers at the library, or maybe ask his co-workers if he could borrow a device for his projects. I said I'd be happy to help him find alternative solutions, but that lending him my personal laptop still felt like too much of a privacy risk. Marcus said those options were inconvenient and that it would be much easier if he could just use my laptop for a few hours at home. He promised he wouldn't look at any of my personal files and would only use it for work-related tasks. I told Marcus that his promises didn't carry much weight, given that he'd already violated my privacy once, despite saying he respected my boundaries. I said that trust takes time to rebuild, and that I wasn't ready to give him unsupervised access to my personal devices. Marcus accused me of being paranoid and controlling. He said that healthy relationships require trust, and that my refusal to let him borrow my laptop proved that I was holding grudges instead of moving forward from past mistakes. I tried to explain that protecting my privacy wasn't about holding grudges, but about learning from experience and setting appropriate boundaries. I said that Marcus had shown he couldn't resist snooping when given the opportunity, so eliminating that opportunity seemed like the smart choice. Marcus started bringing up the laptop situation regularly, mentioning how inconvenient it was for him to have to go to the library or ask co-workers for help with his projects. He'd make comments about how other couples share everything and don't have trust issues like ours. He began comparing me to his ex-girlfriend, who apparently had no problem sharing devices and personal information. Marcus said she understood that couples should be transparent with each other and that hiding things creates more problems than sharing them. I told Marcus that comparing me to his ex wasn't fair, and that different people have different comfort levels with privacy. I said that wanting to keep my personal devices and information private didn't mean I was hiding anything inappropriate from him. The argument escalated when Marcus said my privacy concerns were excessive, and that normal people don't worry so much about their partners seeing their personal files. He claimed that my secrecy was making him more suspicious, not less. I pointed out that Marcus's reaction to my boundary setting was actually proving why I needed those boundaries in the first place. His inability to accept my decision and his attempts to pressure me into changing my mind showed that he still didn't respect my right to privacy. Marcus has been sulking about the laptop situation for weeks now, making passive-aggressive comments about how hard it is to get work done when your girlfriend doesn't trust you. He acts like my refusal to lend him my computer is a personal attack rather than a reasonable boundary. That story wraps up there, and Marcus really thought one apology would erase the fact that he's already proven he can't be trusted with access to personal devices. The pressure tactics and guilt trips just reinforce why OP was smart to maintain that boundary. Someone who respects your privacy doesn't spend weeks trying to convince you to give them access to your personal information, especially after they've already violated your trust once. Let's move into another story about financial expectations and relationship dynamics. Am I the bad person for not paying for my partner's vacation? My girlfriend Rachel has been planning a trip to Hawaii for her birthday next month, and she's been dropping increasingly obvious hints that she expects me to pay for the entire vacation since I make more money than she does. Rachel started talking about the Hawaii trip back in January, researching hotels and flights and activities she wanted to do during the week-long celebration. At first, I assumed she was saving up for the trip herself, or maybe expecting it to be a joint expense that we'd split based on our different income levels. But as the planning progressed, Rachel started making comments about how amazing it would be to have someone who could afford to make her birthday dreams come true. She'd send me links to expensive resort packages and talk about how this trip would be the perfect way for me to show how much I care about her. When I asked Rachel directly about how she planned to pay for the trip, she seemed surprised by the question. She said she'd assumed that since I make significantly more money than she does, I would want to treat her to something special for her milestone birthday. I told Rachel that while I'd be happy to contribute to the vacation costs, I wasn't planning to pay for the entire expensive trip by myself. I suggested we could find a more budget-friendly option that we could both afford, or maybe do something local instead of traveling to Hawaii. Rachel got upset and said I was being cheap and unromantic. She argued that people who truly love their partners want to make their dreams come true, especially for important birthdays. She said my reluctance to pay showed that I didn't value her happiness or our relationship. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not wanting to make her happy, but about the financial reality of spending several $1,000s on a vacation. I said that even though I make more money than she does, I still have my own bills and financial goals that I need to consider. Rachel pointed out that I'd recently bought myself some expensive electronics and had taken a guy's trip with my friends last year. She said that if I could spend money on things I wanted, I should be willing to spend money on things that would make her happy too. I explained that those purchases had been planned and saved for over time, not spontaneous expensive decisions. I said that a last-minute Hawaii vacation for someone else's birthday wasn't something I'd budgeted for or could easily afford without impacting my other financial responsibilities. Rachel started crying and said she felt like I didn't see her as worth the investment. She claimed that other boyfriends would be excited about the opportunity to spoil their girlfriends for special occasions, and that my focus on money proved I cared more about finances than her feelings. The conversation got heated when Rachel accused me of being selfish and stingy. She said that people in serious relationships share financial resources and support each other's goals and dreams, even when it requires sacrifice from one partner. I told Rachel that there's a difference between supporting each other and being expected to fund expensive vacations on demand. I said that a healthy relationship involves both people contributing to shared expenses, rather than one person automatically paying for everything the other person wants. Rachel started posting on social media about how disappointing it is when people don't prioritize your happiness, with obvious references to birthday plans that might not work out. She shared articles about love languages and how some people show affection through gift-giving and experiences. Her friends began commenting about how important it is to have supportive partners who celebrate your special moments properly. Several of them made pointed remarks about how real love involves sacrifice and generosity, which I knew were directed at me and my refusal to fund the Hawaii trip. Rachel has been giving me the cold shoulder for 2 weeks now, making comments about how she'll have to scale back her birthday plans because some people aren't willing to invest in their relationships. She acts like my financial boundaries are a personal rejection rather than practical limitations. She started looking at cheaper alternatives like weekend trips to nearby cities, but she makes sure I know that these backup plans are disappointments compared to her original Hawaii dreams. Every conversation about her birthday becomes a guilt trip about what could have been if I cared enough to make it happen. The whole situation has made me question whether Rachel sees me as a partner or as a funding source for her lifestyle goals. Her expectation that I should automatically pay for expensive vacations just because I earn more money feels like she's treating our relationship as a financial arrangement rather than an equal partnership. That story ends there, and Rachel really thought having a boyfriend with more money meant automatic access to expensive vacation funding. The guilt trips and social media passive aggression show this was never about celebrating her birthday together. It was about getting someone else to pay for her luxury travel dreams. Expecting your partner to drop several $1,000s on a last-minute vacation without discussion or planning is pretty entitled behavior, regardless of income differences. Moving on to another story about housing expectations and emergency accommodations. Am I the bad person for refusing to host my friend after their breakup? My friend David went through a really messy breakup 3 weeks ago and has been asking to stay at my place while he figures out his housing situation. The thing is, David wants to crash on my couch for what he's calling a few weeks, but which sounds like it could easily turn into months of awkward cohabitation. David and his ex-girlfriend shared an apartment that was primarily in her name, so when they broke up, he had to move out pretty much immediately. He's been staying with different friends for a few days at a time, but now he's asking if he can settle in at my place for a longer period while he apartment hunts. When David first asked if he could stay with me, I felt really bad for him because going through a breakup is tough, and suddenly being homeless on top of that seemed overwhelming. But I also knew from experience that David can be a difficult house guest who doesn't clean up after himself and tends to overstay his welcome. Last year, David stayed at my place for what was supposed to be one night after a party, but he ended up camping on my couch for nearly a week. He left dishes in the sink, used my bathroom products, ate my food, and generally made himself way too comfortable in my space. I told David that I could let him stay for maybe 3 or 4 days while he figured out his immediate situation, but that I couldn't commit to hosting him for several weeks. I explained that my apartment is small and that having a long-term house guest would be stressful for both of us. David got upset and said he couldn't believe I was abandoning him during the worst time in his life. He argued that true friends help each other through crises, and that refusing to let him stay showed that our friendship didn't mean much to me. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not wanting to help him, but about recognizing my own limitations and boundaries when it comes to sharing my living space. I said that a few days of help was what I could offer, but that longer-term housing was something he needed to figure out independently. David said that a few days wouldn't be enough time for him to find a new apartment, and that a week-long stay would require her to make other arrangements. I offered to help him look at apartment listings online, and even suggested he could borrow some money for a security deposit if he found a place quickly. But David said apartment hunting was stressful and time-consuming, and that he needed a stable base of operations while he dealt with the emotional trauma of his breakup. He argued that asking him to find housing within a few days was unrealistic and showed that I didn't understand how hard his situation really was. I felt caught between wanting to help a friend in crisis and protecting my own living situation and mental health. David's breakup had been really dramatic and messy, with lots of crying phone calls and angry texts with his ex, and I wasn't sure I could handle weeks of that energy in my small apartment. When I maintained my position about the 3-day limit, David got angry and said I was being selfish and unsupportive. He pointed out that he would do the same for me if our situations were reversed, and that real friends don't abandon each other during the hardest times in their lives. That story ends there, and David really thought he could guilt-trip his way into a weeks-long sleepover after already proving he's a terrible house guest. The fact that he immediately went into victim mode instead of appreciating the few days being offered shows exactly why OP was smart to set boundaries. Sometimes helping a friend means knowing when to say no before they take advantage of your kindness. After diving into all these wild stories, I hope your own problems feel a little more manageable. Whether it's family drama, workplace boundaries, or relationship expectations gone wrong, these tales remind us that setting limits isn't selfish, it's necessary. Sometimes the people closest to us test our boundaries the most, and that's exactly when we need to hold firm. Be sure to subscribe for more stories just like these every evening, and I will see you again tomorrow. Take care.